Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to VR Download. Hopefully you saw our showcase yesterday. If you haven't, it's on our channel with a lot of cool new games coming to VR headsets and an extraordinary number of mixed reality games. We have a very, very big show today. I've got David over there in London, myself in New York, and we're ready to do the VR Download. I forgot my intro here, David, if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty improvised today. So this is going to be a monstrous show. If you didn't see our announcement on UploadVR.com, we have moved the show permanently to Thursdays now. And if you read that announcement, you'll know that that's because we found that Tuesdays was often our heaviest writing day. Me in particular, I found that often we were having to finish articles right before we went on the show, delaying it. Delaying the show. We had to sometimes say, you know what, we're just not going to write that article until after the show, which is a really difficult decision to make in this industry as a news outlet. And so we thought we'd move to Thursday so that we can guarantee that we can do it on time and that we can do it consistently and we don't have to skip it, because you'll also know, if you're a regular viewer, that we had to skip the last 2 weeks. But yes, that means that because A, we skipped 2 weeks, and B, we skipped those 2 weeks because the quantity of news was so extreme. Today is going to be a monster show. We have 11 categories, and within those categories, each of them have multiple topics. So we're going to try and get through this as quickly as we can, but at the same time, this is probably going to be quite a few hours, this show, to get through it. And in a way, I'm dreading that because I am in England where we do not have air conditioning, and yet it is the heat wave week. So I'm already sweating. This is going to be interesting to see what it's like in a few hours.
Yeah, it's funny. I really feel bad for you there, David, because I'm in a cloffice, as I call it. It's a closet office, and the air conditioners are in other rooms. So I close the door off here, and the air conditioning from those rooms don't get into this room. But that's not as bad as what you're going to be experiencing there in England. So we'll have to try to blow through this as quickly as we can. We've got Quentin M in our comments, and Not Suspicious, one of the people I believe that was in our showcase yesterday, and everyone tuning in. I notice we've also got this on the UploadVR.com homepage because of the way things are set up for the showcase yesterday. It's now showing this. So thank you to all of our viewers tuning in for the first time for a VR Download. This is our weekly event covering the latest in technology news, showcasing the next generation of personal computing. David and I have been at this for a couple years now. This is a studio that he made from scratch in virtual reality and demonstrating some of the very latest technologies. So yes, it's not perfect, but it is also some of the very best things we can do with VR right now. I'm seeing VR Gamer Dude, Don, in our comments saying it is super hot in Missouri too. It is hot everywhere. This is the summer days when headsets become a pain to use if you don't have air conditioning. David, why don't we get into this first news here, because a lot of people are playing this game despite that heat. Why don't you break it down for us?
Yeah, first I just want to call out Quentin's comment. Very funny, the idea that people are going to start dropping their news on Thursday just to mess with us. Sometimes it really did feel like that on Tuesdays, like they were doing that, but obviously they weren't. Meta in particular, they didn't used to do their Quest versions on Tuesday, but they actually changed at some point to announcing their new Quest versions just as we started the show, which you have to wonder, does anyone at Meta watch our show? I think I know a few that do, and so it's interesting that they would pick that date. But yeah, let's talk about Gorilla Tag, because as we've said before on this show, we don't often talk about games except when there's something significant to the overall industry that is somewhat relevant to them. So the news here is that Gorilla Tag has 1 million daily active players and 3 million monthly active players. So that's crazy when you think about it. And also, from a revenue perspective, they've exceeded $100 million of revenue. And the reason we're talking about this is because it shows the scale of this industry. It shows that the industry is clearly at a scale that the naysayers, the VR is dead crowd would not be able to comprehend. In fact, this is just a narrative violation in that sense. Like, this does not fit with the idea that VR is dead. You have 1 million people every day playing this game, which is currently the most popular VR game, and 3 million every month. The 3 million statistic didn't surprise me. That makes complete sense to me. Rec Room also has around 3 million monthly active VR players, and they were clear that is VR players, not just general players. But 1 million daily is astonishing, and 100 million revenue, that's huge too.
Yeah, I think we need to move on as quickly as it can, but my comment here will be that what are the ages of those 1 million players that are coming back to the headsets daily? I would assume they are all in the exact sweet spot that Meta is trying to aim for. So ages 10 to 15. I think that's kind of where Meta seems to be targeting its push, right? Like until last year, the age limit on Quest headsets was 13, and we talked to Meta about that, like, well, what changed, and I didn't really get a clear explanation of anything that really changed, other than they thought the weight had decreased a little bit on the headsets enough to support younger people. They've also done a lot of effort to add supervision services. So you can, of course, cast your headset view to a nearby device, but now there's account supervision. You can lock out certain apps if you don't want to. But we've seen things in the last couple of weeks, David, like I Am Cat launch out of nowhere on App Lab and just rack up tens of thousands of downloads in a very short amount of time. And I have to think it's the same core user base that is keeping Gorilla Tag alive. And then what that all builds for me, David, is we're going to build into a lot of pricing news in the rest of this, right? Here is the user base that is going to go and upgrade from Quest 2 to Quest 3, right? Like this is only going to get bigger. And if Meta is targeting that group of 10 to 18-year-olds, they're, Quests were already big Christmas presents back in 2020, 2021. And people have forgotten that, right? And we're on the cusp. Like Quest 3 was held back by its price, and it's all coming together this year.
Yeah, I think people are forgetting that for many Christmases in a row, for a few Christmases in a row, sorry, the Quests were selling incredibly well. And we knew that because each Christmas day, the Oculus app was the number one app on phone. So that app that's required to set up the headset. But I think what really brought Quests officially into that 10 to 13 age group was the creation of these preteen accounts, that system that's in place now, where, as you say, it's a new account class that parents have supervision over. But let's not pretend that that age group wasn't there beforehand, right? They were playing it. You could go into any social VR app or multiplayer app and you would see them. But the thing I would point out is, alongside every other age group, it's not this. There is a certain narrative that says, oh, this is all just kids, this is all just preteens. But if you go into a social VR platform, if you go into multiplayer, you'll find people from all creeds and ages and countries all over the world. It's one of the things that really surprises you at first when you go in there, because you do expect to see this very particular demographic at first of, just like 10 to 25-year-old males. But that's not actually the case once you do end up playing. And I think this is just one of the many segments that's adopting this. And Gorilla Tag is just one of the success stories in VR. But as you say, let's try to move on from that, unless there's anything else you want to add or anything in our comments.
Yeah, I want to bring up a couple member comments, and also just calling out Not Suspicious. Their game in the showcase yesterday was the Airspace Defender. So that looks a lot like Missile Command, just pinching in front of you as the missiles come in. It's a brilliant idea. With the moment I saw it, it was like, yeah, that we have to have it. And it was a really cool idea, and it's amazing to see these new ideas pop up. We had a ton of them in our showcase, and keep sending those in to tips at uploadvr.com so we can cover interesting, weird ideas. And then let's see, Guy Godin saying that he thinks 10 to 12 is the core age group that Meta is targeting. And then Quentin is saying, I wish they could find a way to make adult-only lobbies. Great game, but I don't want to hang out with a bunch of kids. And other people reinforcing that the mixture here of lobbies is really problematic for a lot of adult users. And, at the same time, Meta is trying to bring in more of those people, by the shovel load into VR, basically.
Yeah, well, Rec Room has tried something with junior accounts where they obviously tried a system to sort this out, and there are games that do it by height. There's a Horizon World bar that has a height limit, and then sometimes they have a bouncer that actually kind of checks to see if someone seems like they're overage, which is an interesting but obviously not scalable solution. Chrome Colossus here in our comments says Generation VR, and that's something I've heard a lot, because these kids growing up with headsets, I don't think they're going to stop using them once they get older, right? This is going to be something that they grow up with, and so it becomes part of their life. And so as they get
Mm.
older, the same headsets that they've used for Gorilla Tag, over time they're going to start using for productivity. They're going to start using for just communicating across the globe with someone else. They're going to use for all the kinds of use cases that VR is still in its infancy for. VR gaming is mainstream today, but none of the other use cases are. Is the way I would put the is VR mainstream yet question. But the final thing is I just want to push against this idea that I know people aren't saying only, but there is this kind of implication that Meta is only targeting this. I think they're targeting all age groups. Like this is something where VR is targeting all age groups. Look at the content that Meta's putting out, right? It's clearly not all aimed towards children. None of the spatial computing stuff is aimed towards children. They have no need for that. What's the Microsoft partnership for? Bringing your Windows PC in? Are 12-year-old kids going to be, using Blender and other 3D creativity tools through PC? No, it's just one of Meta's areas that they're trying to
I
target.
mean, if you want to get something cool into
100
Roblox,
million
that's
or
the
a
path,
billion
David.
users without targeting all of these age groups at once.
What you're describing is the path that every teenager who has become a game developer in their later years, or even as a teenager, kind of went down. They started playing the games, and then they realized, I want to screw around with this game a little bit more and put my own shit into it. And they go to the apps that you're discussing to do that, right? They immediately start messing around and going through tutorials. And I like this idea of generation VR. It's a really interesting idea. It's also a scary idea because what does that generation lose in face-to-face contact in their formative years that other generations did have? How different are they because they've done their socialization online in those early years? What do they lack, or what do they have different than people who didn't grow up that way? But it's interesting what David's discussing here about targeting everyone. I think that's true. I get that. You don't make a great product by targeting only, like, you want to make it for everyone, right? And what I'm seeing here is Apple Vision Pro at $3,500, targeting a very specific subset of people. And I'm seeing Quests at less than $500, all targeting a specific subset of people, while both are evolving their software platforms in real time to try to have future products that serve everyone.
Yeah, well, you say less than $500. Quest 3 is $499.99, which is, essentially $500. And I think at that point, that's not really in the territory of what children like that in most families are going to get for Christmas or for their birthday. That's what Quest 2 does. I would argue that the vast majority of people who are using of that age using Quest are using the older Quest 2. And we'll talk later about how maybe some of them will upgrade to Quest 3S. But I think when you get to Quest 3 at 500 for something like that, that's in the kind of territory that you probably aren't seeing the majority of families buy their children at that kind of price. Yeah, we have Guy Godin in our comments, the developer of Virtual Desktop, saying the vast majority of users are young demographic, though, whether you like it or not. Well, I mean, it's just not true. I play multiplayer VR games all the time. I go on social VR platforms. The vast majority are adults that are playing these games. I'm sure there are some specific games that appeal to children. Like, look at this
Who
thing.
has
It's
the
a
time for
cartoon
VR?
monkey.
Right? It's like, I want to go be a cat right now, right? Like, you just have this random thought, and the person who has the time, I want to go be a monkey, right? The person who has the time are kids, right? Those are the people who are optionally putting on these headsets before every other device they own. And I'm seeing, like, in our comments, this idea, Quentin, I'm really excited for this generation of kids playing VR to grow up and use their knowledge of playing VR in making VR experiences. We've seen this in our comments, in the developer community, of just this shameful situation where devs that know what they're doing in 2D flat screen games go and pick up a VR headset and aren't invested in the quality of the experience. They aren't invested in, like, putting on the headset the same way people who spent their teenage years as monkeys and cats are going to be invested in the quality of the experience.
Yeah, something really interesting that I've read about from multiple people that have kind of looked into this is that it appears that the younger that you start, the less likely you are to have any kind of VR sickness. So that these kids, obviously, one of the first reactions you see to Gorilla Tag from certain adults is, I can't play this. It's so grabby, it's so fast moving that I just get motion sick. And you get these kids that go into this game and they're just moving around at such pace, and you never get this indication of, oh, I feel sick. And obviously, just, at that age, there, I can only make the sort of layman's assumption that the mind is getting ready to see what are the experiences that I can expect over my life. And so it sees this and it says, okay, I accept that this is something, therefore I can, the neuroplasticity at that age is so rapid that they're able to just adapt to these experiences. Whereas if you're an adult who isn't used to this kind of thing, your vestibular system is not used to not feeling motion while your eyes are seeing you move all over the place, and you just go, I feel sick, because we understand that that's a significant issue for many adults.
So lots of theories there from David. We'll look for whether research supports in the coming years. Guy's comment there. Sure, there are older folks playing other games, but they won't make 1 million daily active users. I think that's what Guy's pushback there is.
Yeah, sure.
These are the people driving
that makes
the daily active
especially
use.
in a game like Gorilla Tag. Like I said, it's a cartoon monkey, right? Like, of course, it's going to appeal to children. And adults have jobs. They have responsibilities. They have children of their own to take care of. Whereas children, once you get out of school, unless you're like have to care for an older family member or something like that, obviously, you're pretty much free to do whatever you want and have all that time. And that's the case in a lot of gaming, right? It's a case where you do see this massive engagement of children simply because they have the free time, but often not the money. That's the old saying about this, right? That like when you're a kid, you have all these games that you can play, but you can't afford a lot of the games you want to play. And then when you're an adult, you could afford to buy all these games that you want, but you don't even have the time to play them anymore. And that's the kind of horrible trade-off. I guess maybe retirement is when you have both things at the same time.
Yeah, we're waiting for so I'm seeing people talk about Nintendo kids, right? And we're waiting for the Nintendo kids to go into retirement, and it's like, it's a joke here, but I do kind of need to bring up that like a lot of the people who are making technology today were those Nintendo kids. They were raised on Sega Genesis. They were raised on Nintendo. They were maybe raised on even the systems before those early 90s things. But these people from the 90s, they were kids back then who are playing VR now, right? There's the same age that when we were playing Nintendo are kids that are playing VR now. And I'm noticing a trend. You see things like Palmer Luckey's chromatic handheld. You've got the analog handheld out there. You've got multiple tools to convert old video games to modern video games. And all those old video games existed before all of the they existed after the coin-operated arcades. You put in a quarter at a time, but before the microtransactions that try to get you 99-cent cosmetics for everything, right? And so you've got this chunk of 90s games that are being reborn in VR in various ways, and you're seeing like adults trying to build technology, these lessons that they had from these early gaming systems of the 90s into their modern games. And we're seeing like the beginnings of that, but I'm curious to see what the kids of the 90s are able to build for the kids of the 2020s.
As you say, I think that's what we're seeing a lot. Like a lot of the inspiration you can clearly see in the games today come from a lot of those 90s games, even some 80s games. We see Don in our comments saying, Atari, he's an Atari kid all the way back then. And as some people are saying in our comments, a lot of these Quest kids today are going to grow up and build the next generation of VR experiences and, mixed reality, and maybe even for like AR glasses, because by that time, this is going to be a very, very different technology space by the time that they are in the workforce. But let's move on to talk about a little bit of Quest 3 news. That's our section number 2. We're going to talk about some Quest 3 news. And there's 2 news pieces here. Firstly, that Meta now sells Quest 3 refurbished for $450. So instead of paying the full $500, you can get it for $50 less. The other one is that Quest 3 seems to have sold at least 1 million units. We'll just very quickly talk about the refurb. There's nothing crazy to say here other than that from like a warranty and coverage perspective, this is identical to buying a new Quest. You get the same 1-year warranty. They test and refurbish and do all of the kind of cleaning and make sure that this feels to you like a new product. That's their claim, that it's going to feel exactly like you got a new one, except it was somebody's that they've returned or was used in some sort of demo or something, and then they brought it back in. $50 is not a huge discount, but what I do think is quite a significant discount is the 512 gigabyte model. It's normally $650 new, but certified refurbished, it's I think $580. So that's a $70 discount. So for only $80 more than the 128 gig new, you can get a refurbed 512. And I think if you're someone who really wants a lot of a lot of games on your Quest, you anticipate that you're going to use a lot of storage, but you find that $650 price tag eye-watering, that could be a way to get it for a slightly more accessible price.
David, why don't you just go right into the other Quest 3 news here and break down that number, because it's going to be related, right? Like we're going to have to talk about these things together.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because we put out this article with the very clear words, at least, and those words seem to, by a few people, have been ignored. So a software developer, David Bigelow, sometimes I think watches our show. Oh, he's in our comments right now. I've just noticed it update. Hello, has been diligently watching the leaderboards for the Quest 3 introductory mixed reality experience first encounters. So if you don't have a Quest 3, when you set it up, you're put into this introduction experience that uses mixed reality. It uses the 3D room mesh that Quest 3 generates to have this spaceship crash through your ceiling, and you can see through that hole in the ceiling like a sci-fi space landscape, then lands on your table or on your floor, because again, it's using the room mesh. And at that point, these little alien things start kind of flying through your walls, and as you shoot them, you can actually shoot through your walls. If you miss them and hit your wall, you'll actually cut a big hole out of your wall, and so through your real wall, you'll see this sci-fi landscape. And it's a perfect introduction to mixed reality because it gets you to understand just how magical this distinction between the real and virtual can be. And even though the Quest 3's pass-through is grainy, you can very much so imagine that, like in a generation or two, just how compelling and realistic some of this could be. And all of that's kind of irrelevant to the point here that after you complete this, you get a score based on how many of these little alien things you've shot. And David Bigelow has been following the leaderboards of this score because underneath it says how many participants there are, i.e., how many people have completed the introduction experience of Quest 3. And yesterday, that number passed 1 million. 1 million people have done the introductory experience. So based on that, we can say that at least 1 million Quest 3s have been sold, because you don't have to complete this tutorial, right? You could say no when it asks if you want to scan your room, and then it just won't work. You could start it and 15 seconds later say, this is boring, and quit it and just go straight through to the Quest system interface. So some people will have done that, but at least 1 million people have this headset because they've done the introductory experience.
Yeah, a lot of people in our comments are sort of giving you the benefit, like, they're looking at your estimates and going, yeah, maybe your estimate is quite low compared to where it actually is. And I think that's a fair assumption, but we're trying to report on what actual data points we have out there rather than our putting our finger up to the air and guessing the way the wind is blowing, which is how we feel some of those analysts out there do when they try to estimate the size of the market. But this is, of course, all coming before price cuts and big content pushes that are going to come at the end of this year, right? The Quest 3 launched with us and others noting that this is more expensive and there is a cheaper one right around the corner. And developers themselves have kept that in mind too, right? Who wants to launch their project that they've been working on for 3 years when you only got one headset that is being constrained because people aren't buying it, waiting for the next one?
Yeah, it's not that Quest 3 is going to get a price cut, as you say. It's that there is a cheaper alternative coming out soon. So I think we'll actually just go straight to that topic. We were going to do it in our next category, but we'll talk about this as well because it makes sense. So it's not even that I think most people are even aware of Quest 3S, right? You'd be surprised how many people will not regard the existence of an upcoming product until it's officially announced, even if there are actual official leaks from the company's website. I've often seen people that literally do not have any awareness of something arriving before it is officially announced. And that's okay. Some people have that view that they don't want to read rumors. They don't want to read leaks. It's until it's announced, it's not real to them. I think it's just the price, right? Like Quest 2 launched at $300, which was $100 less than Quest 1. So when Quest 2 launched, Quest 1 was instantly killed off the market. Quest 2, that was it. But that's very different from what happened with Quest 3 because it had this much more expensive pancake lens system, because it added, these extra sensors and really had a higher cost than Quest 2. You can tell by using a Quest 3 that it is this slightly more premium product. They still sold Quest 2, and they still do sell Quest 2. And worse than that, they cut it to $200. So you have this situation where the predecessor that can still play all the same games right now, that will change soon, but right now can still play all the same games, is less than half the price. So it's not surprising to me that Quest 3 is selling a lot slower than Quest 2 did, where we know that as of last summer, there were something like 20 million Quest 2s out there. And now 8 months in, we have 1 million of these. But as you're alluding to, Meta is quite clearly about to launch a headset called Quest 3S that is a kind of midpoint between these two headsets. And the news that has happened this week is that Quest 2 is now out of stock in the United States. We tracked it back in February. The higher tier 256 gigabyte storage model went out of stock, but now even the base model is out of stock in the US. If you're in the United States right now, you can't buy a Quest 2 from Meta, you can't buy one from Amazon or Best Buy or Walmart or Target, unless on those platforms you pick a third-party seller that charges you a significantly higher price than it's normally sold for. And so to us, this indicates that Quest 3S is about to launch anytime soon, in the next few weeks at best, or the next few months at most.
We've got a lot of people talking about this in our comments, and it's really interesting. So Guy Godin's comment, it's really dumb that Meta doesn't reveal these numbers, like the 20 million figure for Quest 2. Why are they hiding it? And I'm seeing people responding to that. So Headset Historian replying, where is it? It might be because the majority of news outlets like to be extremely negative about VR, so any numbers would be ammo for them, and then shareholders would be spooked. I'm going to add a related sort of question there, right? The follow-up question is, how many are still in use? So we started off here with Gorilla Tag, right, at 1 million plus, explaining, objectively speaking, here's what they're saying is their user base, and they've got that number. But this question of, you just sold 20 million, how many of them are in disuse, and is the absolute natural follow-up from any reporter. And Meta has been even vaguer in that area than anywhere else. Like they give her less data on that than they do even about sales numbers. They just said, oh, it's more effective. Like the Quest 3 is more effective than Quest 2. We're not telling you how, but it is.
Yeah, to be fair, they don't reveal other numbers, right? They don't reveal sales numbers, and they don't reveal usage numbers. This is just not something that they put out there. This 20 million number that we have for Quest 2 comes from a internal Meta meeting that was leaked to The Verge. And then a few months after that, another Meta meeting was leaked where Mark Zuckerberg told staff, when he was talking about Apple Vision Pro, he said the exact words, "We have sold tens of millions of Quests." So that's the only reason we even know about this. Active users were also leaked around 2 years ago now, maybe a year and a half ago. There was an active user figure that was leaked to the Wall Street Journal, and that was 6.4 million. So there were 6.4 million monthly active users back then. We don't know how that's changed since then. But if I had to guess, if someone put a gun to my head, it's somewhere between 5 and 10 million that are being actively used, and then the other half are not. They are, in cupboards and shelves and et cetera, et cetera. But while it is frustrating that Meta did not give specific figures on Quest 3, it is very interesting to hear that the retention is higher. So given that, right now these play the same content, right? Quest 3 and Quest 2 all have access to the same store with no differences right now. As of now, that's going to change this year. That means that the hardware is what's changing the retention. The quality increase in the lenses, the ability to have color pass-through, the improved comfort from the better center of mass, the ringless controllers, some combination of all of these things together. Obviously, I even forgot one of the biggest aspects, of course, the new twice as powerful GPU. That means you get a higher resolution image and a higher refresh rate in many games. Some combination of all of these things has come together to increase retention, and that's a very good sign for the industry in general. But we've talked about that in the past.
Yeah,
show.
it's a good sign for the industry, and we need to move on to this Quest 2 and 3 news. But like, I'm seeing Guy keep talking about something that happened to him. He says Meta sent out a mass email with his active users mentioned in it, yet they don't, really talk about active users, right, in general. And
Yeah,
that
for specific apps they do. They don't talk about it for the platform, but yeah, I think he was quite annoyed at that because he didn't give permission for that. Though I do believe it was automated. I'm as far from what I have heard, that was an automated email, but that doesn't make it okay. They still shouldn't have revealed his numbers without asking him.
And so just this active user base, so and your estimates, David, like let's just go with your estimates here for a minute of suggesting what is it, about 50% or more of headsets sold go into the disuse pile
Yes, but
eventually.
just before you say anything, that you said that people, the journalists asked that, but they never asked that about Xbox, right? The thing about that 20 million figure, which is interesting, is that that's the same number of Xboxes that were sold at that time, the new generation Series S and X. Nobody puts out that figure in their news outlet and says, "Oh, but how many Xboxes are still being used? How many are just sitting there under the TV and people never bother to take out the controller and put batteries in it?"
All right, so I'm grant that. Now I'm going to go to the competitive layer of why that info might not get shared. So let's just go, to David's point of defending VR here with his data. Let's go one step further and say, like, okay, Meta has data that let's say they've sold 2 million Quest 3s. That those 2 million Quest 3s, less than 50% of them for the first time are going into the disuse pile. Like they're seeing that kind of, just hypothetically, that increase in engagement. Now we go forward and they've got a $300 headset that does almost everything. It just got slightly different lenses and maybe a few other things to bring the price down to the $300 price point. And it runs all of the content as the Quest 3. And they sell, let's say, 20 million of them this year. Let's say they sell 20 million Quest 3Ss this year. But 40% of those Quest 3Ss go into the disuse pile. They wouldn't release that info because that puts a target on, like, that's data that is valuable to Meta in deciding what their next headset is. That's even better at, let's have only 30% go into the disuse pile. Let's have only 20% go into the disuse pile. If they give that amount away, they're telling competition exactly what to build to get better usage numbers out of those headsets.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's definitely like competitive and business reasons behind this that um, Meta would want to keep it to themselves for these certain reasons, but it would definitely hugely benefit developers and I think benefit the general sentiment from the public about VR to know these figures because I don't think they're hiding them because they're bad. I think it is what you're saying. They don't want to let their competitors see this is what's working here, this is what's working here, so we can chase them in this particular way.
So yeah, I'm thinking let's move on here, but I'm thinking I think once they reach a lead that is uncatchable, that's when we'll see those numbers actually get announced by them. But yeah, let's get into the Quest 2 and 3 news.
Yeah, I think just before we move off this, because we did bring this topic forward, we'll talk very briefly about this Quest 3S. We've described it many times in this show. If you don't know what we're talking about, just type UploadVR Quest 3S into Google or type Quest 3S in our search. But the really interesting thing here will be to find out how much retention is being changed in Quest 3 by the lenses and how much is by the color pass-through and the improved processor and the new controllers. Because this is going to have the new processor, right? You're going to get higher fidelity graphics. You're going to get apps that load faster. You're going to get higher refresh rates in many apps. You're going to get that color pass-through. You're going to get these better ringless controllers, but you're not going to get those new lenses. So that will be the really interesting factor to see here. Was it those lenses that brought forward retention? Was it that new slimmer form factor or wasn't it? We're not going to get that information from Meta. It's extremely unlikely that they come out and say this, but what we will do is we will hear from developers because right now there are developers on social media from major Quest apps who do share like things like currently the vast majority of their new users are Quest 3. The Golf Plus developer revealed that very recently. So Quest 2, their new users are still Quest 2. And so I think what we'll see here, we both expect that this Quest 3S is going to sell significantly faster than Quest 3. This is going to sell at the same pace as Quest 2, most likely, if not higher, because it also adds mixed reality. And that just comes back to this thing that John Carmack has said repeatedly, that people have an intuition that every $100 you shave off the price gives a linear increase in sales. And according to Carmack, it's not. It's an exponential increase in sales. So if this thing can really go from 500 of Quest 3 to 300 for 3S and still have most of its capabilities minus the lenses, that's going to be a massive change for the pace of adoption.
And I'm still wondering about a $200 hand tracking only headset that carries the XR2 Gen 2. If Meta doesn't do it, it's possible someone else does. And that too is going to be like, if that happens, it would be a powerful device to consider in this ecosystem. But someone has to deliver.
From the bill of materials we've seen from Chinese firms that are close to supply chain, that chip itself, including all of the computing hardware that it requires, is cost something like $130. The idea of building an entire headset around it for $70, just to me, it doesn't make sense unless somebody was willing to deeply subsidize. The controllers are not worth $100. These things, from what we've seen in those estimates, as I've said before, these are like $30, $35, right? If you cut that off when you take into account the profit margin, you can get to $250. But getting that other $250 shaved off, I just don't see that happening. I think this thing is going to be heavily optimized for cost, right? If you look at its design, you can already tell that this kind of is designed to be, it doesn't have the same curve as even Quest 2, never mind Quest 3. I would say that you're going to pick this thing up and it's going to feel cheap and it's going to feel like it was designed to cut every cost possible already just to get to 300, and the controllers are only a small fraction of that.
All right, we'll see. Well, let's get into this software and hardware news with Quest 2 and 3. We've got 5 rapid fire news subjects to get in through here, and we're still 30 minutes into this podcast, so I think you should run through these, David, as quickly as you can.
Yeah, it's a good idea. We'll try to get through these really quite quickly. So the first small news piece that we don't need to talk about a lot is that you can now manually update your Quest system software. People have been very frustrated by Meta's rollout system, where these system software versions roll out gradually over time. Now, this is technically not even meant to solve that. Meta, their reason that's publicly stated for launching this tool is to fix any problems. So say your headset's not working properly. It could just be one of those things that would be fixed by a factory reset, but this is a softer option where using this tool will not wipe your data, but it will update your system software. So they're hoping that any kind of OS level corruption or strange stuff going on is going to be solved by this. This actually goes through the web. We've seen this before with the SideQuest web installer. It uses this web USB standard. So you can plug this into an Android phone technically and go onto a website, MetaQuest software update tool, and sideload an update from your Android phone to your Quest via USB-C. The only device you can't do it on is an iPad or iPhone, because Apple does not allow web USB on iPad or iPhone. You can do it on a Mac, but not through Safari. You have to use Chrome. I think that's really interesting the way they've done this, that it's not Windows or Mac software that's actually through the web. Very cool, and just shows a trend that is somewhat related to VR and AR, because these headsets, especially Quest, rely a lot on web apps, that we're seeing web apps get all of these new capabilities. But for anyone that's been frustrated about Quest software rollout, this is for you. The one thing it will not do, though, is give you sub updates. So, for example, in the V66 software update, that big pass-through improvement that fixes all the warping, or at least mostly fixes it, that's a sub update. So you get that randomly one day through a server-side flag. Deeply frustrating for people who want those updates, but this will not fix that.
Interesting. And this is a important area to watch, web USB and how it gets implemented on other headsets, with David pointing out that Vision doesn't have that. Apple doesn't have that. I would be really curious to see what SideQuest and platforms like that do with the ability to sideload updates. I wish we had this for some old headsets that I would love to revive, right? Like I wish I could plug in a phone and just upload an APK or a new hardware or firmware to run the new headset with some new operating system that does whatever I want it. Yeah, why don't you get into the Quest, the next update here, because it's a big one, a long time coming.
Yeah, this is a really big one. This is an attempt to kind of turn Quest 3 into an Apple Vision Pro Lite in a way. This is a spatial computing update. What this does is this is part of the V67 public test channel, and it's called the new window system, I believe. Yes, new window layout. It's an experimental option, and it lets you freely position 2D windows on Quest. And you can now have up to 6 windows instead of the 3 that you can have in the current stable software. And so, yeah, if you have a Quest, you'll know that currently you're limited to having like these 3 panels that are either directly in front of you in close mode or quite far out in far mode. And in close mode, the side panels aren't angled towards you, so they feel awkward and they're really hard to view. You have to like physically strafe over. And in far mode, they're kind of too big and they're not exactly where you want them to be. With V67 PTC, with this new option, they let you detach panels out of close mode and put them into the distance. There's no like specific far mode anymore. So you can have 3 panels docked to you, and now the side ones are actually angled towards you. That's really, really great update in itself. But you can get these 3 others that you detach and place freely, just like you would in Vision OS. And that gives you up to 6 in total. So yes, 3 docked and 3 in wherever you want. And there's also a full screen mode. You'll see this little full screen icon behind any of these 2D windows. And this works for any window. That's any browser window, any 2D Android app you've sideloaded, any system setting tab, and that brings the window into like a giant window in front of you. You can still bring up your docked windows, but mostly you wouldn't want it for that. You would use this for like viewing a video on a web page, for example, and you can easily, through a very simplified menu bar that replaces the main bar, toggle between pass-through and virtual environment and dim your background, whether it be virtual or real, dim it to exactly what you want. This is something that a lot of people are going to say was heavily inspired, at best, heavily inspired by Vision Pro. A lot of people are going to say this is outright copying, but we should point out that Meta's CTO, Andrew Bosworth, back in February, pushed back against this. Back in February, just a few days after Vision Pro launched, hinting at the time that Meta had been working on this for many months, if not years, and saying that this often happens. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. Probably Meta has been working on this for a very long time, but Vision Pro's announcement and launch caused them to prioritize it over certain other features, because we've seen things like spatial photos, panoramas, travel mode all arrive just in the months after Vision Pro, even though I'm sure Meta has been working on them all for a very long time.
Hello to Unspaghettable on our comments. Thank you for tuning in. And Not Suspicious saying user experience is still a huge barrier to headsets. And that's absolutely true. And that is why this change is such a heated debate topic. And I appreciate David's context there, trying to give the balanced view of there being a little bit of, who's copying who being an open question that we are going to have to deal with in our audience again and again and again. What we saw this back in the days of Rift and Vive. If you missed that era of VR, you didn't see the endless silly comments from people who bought the Rift saying the Rift is cool for this reason, or I bought the Vive and the Vive is cool for this reason. And it just silly all the way down. People trying to justify decisions like having to use Revive to port in content from one platform to the other, and these debates about what an exclusive title is, like people complaining that a bunch of games got funded and made into games, and a bunch of devs got, food on their table and roofs over their heads to make a game, but it came with a requirement that it only launch on one platform. And there were wars about this in comments for years because of platform fanboys trying to justify their purchase. And we're in the earliest days of this with Vision OS and Meta. And we still have yet to see what Android is going to bring to the table from their ecosystem. So we don't know how, like, the fanboys are trying to figure out which sides they're on. They're getting their pitchforks ready. And here on this show, we're going to have to decide how much air we're going to give to those complaints. And I think David's context that he just gave us, right? I don't think there's any secret that Meta is learning from Apple and Apple is learning from Meta, that they both learned from each other and they're both going to continue to learn from each other for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, exactly. And Apple launched their platform, years after Valve and Meta launched theirs. They've had time to learn from everyone else and then launch something public. I mean, Apple Vision Pro's introductory VR experience, the Encounter Dinosaurs, is suspiciously similar to the Oculus Rift's introduction experience, where at the very end you encounter this dinosaur that comes right up to you. You could say that that's a general idea, but you could also say that this is a general idea. Like the ability to place 2D windows freely in space is not one company's idea. This is something we've seen in VR concepts for decades, and it's something that we've seen in, Magic Leap's LumenOS, for example. We saw it in the Rift's Dash. There are many takes on this. I like Headset Historians' comment here, but they point out that Android and iOS is the space where you see this kind of fanboy claims of who's copying who the most. And the reality is, as someone who's watched that space very closely, is that they have both relentlessly copied each other, and it's been great for the consumer in the end. You often see a great feature on iPhone that a few years later comes out on Android. And then you see the exact opposite, a great feature that was on Android that a few years later comes out on iPhone. And you get to this point where today, the experience of using an iPhone and an Android phone compared to the giant space of possibilities of how a pocket computer can work, they are almost identical today. If you go from holding an iPhone to holding an Android phone, they are far more similar than they are different. And I expect in the long term, we will see that with these spatial computing platforms. We already have seen it in a way, right? Like one of the best examples of what you could argue is Apple copying Meta is Vision OS 2's hand gesture. It's the exact same on Quest, where I open up my palm and I pinch into an icon that appears between my index finger and my thumb, and it brings up the menu, right? That could become standard. It would be great for consumers if that was standard, because it means that you put on any headset, you reach your palm up and you pinch, and that's how you get to the menu. You don't have to do a different gesture on every platform. But yeah, I think the focus on that is enormous, on who did things first. What really matters in the end is who does it best, who does it in the most polished way, and just every platform getting these capabilities all together. And of course, as people in our comments are pointing out, the fact that this is happening on a headset that is 1/7 the price.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we should move on to this little bit of hardware news that you've got for this cameraless eye tracking add-on for Quest 2 and 3. I'd like to hear about this, David, because I saw some interesting things at AWE that reminded me of this report. But I want you to break it down for me how this works and break it down for our audience why this is significant.
Sure. So this is pretty wild. This company Insci is wanting to release this as a product, an add-on that you can just slot into your Quest 2 or Quest 3, and it will attach via the USB port on the side. They want to sell this for $160. We should point out that they don't have a solid timeline here. This is going to happen through crowdfunding, and that they are kind of hoping to get this out like early next year is their rough timeline. So it's not the product in specific that we find really interesting here and is quite exciting. It's the technology behind it. And I think that the technology behind this could be how eye tracking finds its way into low-cost headsets. One of the biggest criticisms of Quest 3 is that it doesn't have eye tracking, right? It's a great headset in many ways, but that lack of eye tracking limits what it can do in some ways and may make it feel quite outdated in a few years' time. But one of the things that Meta has argued, Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth, is just, we had to cut something to get to that $500 price. The cost is not just the cameras. It's, then you have to add a bigger battery to sample from those cameras. You have to do a different thermal architecture because bringing those in gets really hot. There's all of these engineering changes that have to be made. And so what's interesting about this Insci Lumi technology is that it's a much simpler and lower cost way to do eye tracking. So instead of using cameras that look at your eyes and do computer vision algorithms to like segment out your pupil, this uses an array of 6 simple photosensors. And so it still has the IR emitters, the IR LEDs around each lens that illuminate your eye. But instead of viewing them with a camera, they have these simple photosensors that measure the intensity of the reflection. And so the reflection of this infrared light is at a different intensity based on which part of your eye it's reflecting off. There's a lower reflection here, as you can see in the image, and a higher reflection here, a lower reflection of the pupil. And that's how they can determine where your pupil is. And they claim that to actually do this, they have to use a machine learning algorithm, but that it's incredibly simple. It's not like a heavy, dense model. It's a simple model that can run at 1,000 hertz, 1,000 times per second. and they claim that that results in a latency of less than a millisecond, an update rate of 1,000 hertz, and uses 5 times less energy, therefore 5 times less battery than cameras. The one trade-off, they say, is that the accuracy is slightly less. The accuracy of the eye tracking you would see in something like Apple Vision Pro or PlayStation VR 2 is slightly less than 1 degree, whereas they say the accuracy for this is 2 degrees. But they claim because this is running at 1,000 hertz with less than 1 millisecond of latency, you can actually get a smaller foveal area in foveated rendering, because even though it's only half as accurate, it's running at like almost 10 times the pace with a much lower latency. So you're updating that eye position quickly. And the kicker is that while they want to sell this add-on for $160, they say that is to make a healthy profit. And they claim that these emitters and photo sensors themselves to add into a headset would cost less than $10.
So this is a big deal, and I there's a couple ways to take this, but I think I'll just respond to our comments since we'll engage with them. This off-topic question: how does watching movies in a VR headset feel? That's a very basic question, and I'm assuming that's from someone who just is trying to figure it out for the first time, and it's a good opportunity to answer that. So on my way back from AWE last week, I put in the Apple Vision Pro in the center seat between two people. So I had people seated on either side of me. They each pulled up a laptop on the left and the right of me, and they worked on their laptops the entire flight. It's like a 5-hour flight. I pulled out a little pocket keyboard, put it in front of me, and then I adjusted the dial on my headset to make everything from here, everything from the tray table upward was Bora Bora, the beach with water lapping the beach, the sounds of the beach coming to my ears. And then I positioned all of my screens up above me, including Dune 2, on a screen that stretched across, it would have been the entire cabin, the size of the cabin. It was an OLED screen, beautiful picture, looked better than any other screen on that flight. It was fantastic. I spent the entire time writing and working on that flight to prove out, wrote like 2 to 3 articles, took off the headset. And at the end of that event, at the end of that, I'm packing everything up, and the guy next to me starts asking me questions about VR, right? He starts going through the questions we all experience. Is this really the future? Did you work in there the whole time? And I'm like, yep. And I'm breaking it all down for him. He's asking me the prices. It's like, yeah, that one is $3,500, but Meta makes one that's $500. And the screen in there, when you get it right, looks just as big. It's just as large. You lose the OLED. But it's a beautiful picture as well on a limited device, and so go ahead.
It's just as big, but it's not the same resolution, right? And the biggest issue with a Quest, if you want to use it for this use case, is that on no official app can you download movies. So if you want to use it on a plane, you better hope that plane has Starlink, which very few airlines have, because otherwise you're not going to be able to view your own media. You could, of course, connect to the plane's own media server. There are some airlines that have a Wi-Fi network on the plane that has a media server on it. That can work through the Quest browser. But in general, I'd say that the biggest issue is going to be comfort. With Vision Pro, it's quite front heavy. Even with Quest, you can make a Quest comfortable with an aftermarket strap, but a lot of them rely on having a lot on the back of your head, like a lot of thickness on the back of your head, and then you can't lean back in a chair. So you're actually, in those cases, going to want to use, in most cases, the default cloth strap on a Quest, and that's the least comfortable way for many people to use a Quest. So it's at the point where the experience is great, right? You get this gigantic cinema screen. As I said in my review of Vision Pro, I was in economy class and I had a better movie watching setup than anyone in first class. You have your own personal cinema, and that's amazing. But you also have this, in many cases, still brick on your face. And in future years, we're going to see these headsets get slimmer and lighter, and that's going to be a solved problem. It's not unsolvable. But right now, you're still going to struggle with that comfort unless you're someone who it just happens to find these headsets comfortable because of the shape of your head.
Or Big Screen Beyond, right? There's an example out there of Big Screen Beyond that was purpose built for this use case. Like they left off headphones, they left off everything out of that device except the display, and the display is high resolution, not as high resolution as Vision Pro, but the comfort, they built the entire headset to take you multiple hours in ways that other headsets aren't. The problem is you have to have a giant PC to power that device.
Yeah, and you have to be tethered to that PC, and you have to have these base stations that are mounted on your walls, so you can't take it on a plane, right? Like there's no headset today that you can take on a plane that can give you an enormous cinema screen that is like really, really comfortable. That's just not something that currently exists. We're in September, we're going to see a headset called Visor, very controversial, but it claims that it has actually gotten to that level of comfort that Big Screen Beyond has gotten to, but in a standalone headset that you can, run apps on and connect to your laptop in front of you. We'll have to find out whether that's true when we try it in September. But we have a lot of questions about this topic that we're talking about with eye tracking. And I think a few of the questions we're seeing here are people asking, like, how does this work in terms of app integration? Is this a standalone feature? The answer is no. This does not magically turn your Quest 3 into a Quest Pro 2. Meta is still the one that controls the software here. Horizon OS, or Quest System Software as it's still actually in practice called, is not a truly open platform in the sense that you can go in and just modify it to make a Quest 3 think that it has eye tracking. That's not how this works. This is primarily being designed for PC VR. So you would use a tool on PC that tells your current OpenXR runtime, whether that's Steam VR or Virtual Desktop's VDXR, that you have eye tracking via this software on PC, transmitting from your headset to the PC, the eye tracking data. There will also be an SDK inside said. So if a developer does want to integrate this into their Quest native app, they can do so. But again, that would be like a per developer thing, not like a general solution. And that is the problem with this sort of accessory, right? You don't get this official support from Meta. That could change if Horizon OS has easy kind of modular support for headsets that do and don't have eye tracking in the future once we start seeing it come to third parties. But again, what we're really interested in here, and what I find fascinating about this, is the underlying technology, not the product. This is, as Shalalaska has just said in the comments, if you are a PC VR chat user, this is going to be great for you, right? Because I imagine within a few weeks, someone's going to have this set up so that you can put this on your Quest and have it run into PC VR chat. For dynamic foveated rendering in things like Flight Simulator on PC, people will get that set up. There's always going to be third-party community open source tools that make all this work on the true open platform that is the PC, but not standalone. But the reason the tech interests me is based on just seeing this, we plan to get a review unit or a preview unit ourselves later in the year when they have it ready. If this works, I could absolutely see this being the way that eye tracking arrives in Quest 4 and maybe even like a Quest 4S as well. This is how eye tracking could come to low-cost headsets. And further than that, more than that, this technology, not specifically this company, maybe this company, but it doesn't have to be, this technology is how I could see eye tracking arriving in AR glasses too. Because you're not going to be running constant eye tracking cameras on glasses, but basic little photo sensors like this, that could absolutely happen.
Yeah, well, this is why I brought up AWE, Augmented World Expo, at that conference. I tried out an event sensor that had been attached to the bottom stock, the right stock of the Meta glasses. And so they had basically printed a little 3D housing for this thing and attached it to a Raspberry Pi Zero in order to just prove out the compute. And at the end of it, you could basically do this, look forward, and then do a pinch motion right here, and that downward facing camera on the side of the glasses, not camera, downward facing event sensor right here would see the little pinch motion right here. Well, what we're seeing is sensor developers basically pitch how they bring down the price of these headsets in significant ways while still giving us the features of the high-end headsets. Now, we go back a second to the copying thing that David and I were talking about, this pinch gesture, right? Oh, and I just activated it. This pinch gesture that's on Vision Pro. What drove me crazy on it, David, was I almost wondered if Apple adding that pinch gesture indicated that Apple will one day ship a headset without eye tracking, because the previous way of accessing the menu was so reliant on it.
Well, not the menu. The previous way that you bring up the control center was to look up, but the menu itself, you pressed a physical button on the top of the headset, right? Like, yes, it should. I don't think there was ever. I don't think this is about eye tracking. I think this is just about the fact that it sucks to have to press a physical button. It's something I said in my Vision Pro review. If you were on our show listening with us after Vision Pro launched, I said it here. It was stupid, right? Vision OS 1, the way that you open the app launcher is you reach your hand up and press a button on the top of the headset. Imagine if to press the Windows Start button on your PC, you had to reach up to the top of your monitor and press a button. It's silly, right? It's like reaching up and pressing a button is not the way that an app launcher should launch. That I think Apple realized that themselves.
Good point. Yeah. So, but what we're getting at is here lower cost sensors to drive more capabilities in lower cost devices, or to bring down the price of higher cost devices. And that's what we see in this, and that's what David just outlined for us in the eye tracking part of the hardware stack.
Yeah, these event sensors are very interesting as well, because as you say, it's the same exact trend of application specific sensors that are lower cost, lower energy, which is absolutely crucial for these glasses, and lower computational expense as well. And that means that you can do things that aren't quite as high fidelity. Like for this, it's from what I understand from your hands-on, is about picking up gestures rather than doing like specific, I'm going to say the word skeletal hand tracking, by picking specific gestures. And yeah, that's something that, in glasses, how often in these outdoor glasses, at least in their first few generations, are you going to need like specific 21 bone skeleton hand tracking versus how often do you want to just swipe through the air to go to the next song or something like that?
And they showed micro gestures, like the idea of doing just little itty bitty gestures right on your fingertips. But I want to bring up Mr. Mycelium's comment here before we move on to the next subject, because it is valuable to our reporting. Do they have a real product demo of this eye tracking, or is it just 3D renders? I don't want to be negative, but these claims sound too good to be true. I have PTSD from other Kickstarters. We do not recommend backing Kickstarters unless you are prepared to lose your money flat out. We've done that for years. That's been a policy David and I have stuck to in our reporting because of just how haywire those Kickstarter projects go. So totally get you there. And then David, just in the last part of this, explained he hasn't tried this out yet. We're going to pursue that demo.
That's correct. But we did see on a call, I did see them demonstrate using it. It's not a render. That this is a real physical product. They have built it. How well it works in the real world, that's a different question, but it's not a render. This is technology that they have built. And they demonstrated it working in Flight Simulator, for example, for PCVR foveated rendering. And hopefully once they do launch their proper crowdfunding campaign, we'll be able to show you that footage. I think right now their model is, so this is going to be $160, but if you pay them $1, you will get it for a discount of $60. So you'll pay $99 extra and then get it. So all you have to do right now, if you believe them or not, is risk $1. I don't want to. Yeah, $1 I think isn't the end of the world, but maybe you don't want to risk that at all.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of VR games at the $1 price point right now that you'd be denying yourself if you spent that $1. But
yeah,
it still stands. People who are making hardware products face a way more difficult problem than people who are doing software products, and it's always risky. And so we're just going to make sure we make all that clear. And I appreciate David's extra context there. There was a question about Ultraleap. That is the event sensor that was Ultraleap's demo at AWE. And on that last subject of just suppliers for headsets, like Ultraleap has had a real hard time of trying to find their way to market, right? They've had industry-leading hand tracking for the better part of a decade now as Leap Motion, and then they merged with another company called Ultra Haptics. And Ultra Haptics has like a cool near-field ultrasonic thing that you can actually feel little haptics wirelessly. But it's not in use. Like their big technology that they're pushing everywhere is their Leap Motion hand tracking. But Meta went and bought a company to do their own sort of tracking via cameras. Apple, the big platform companies, clearly had conversations, I think, with Leap Motion, and just, Leap Motion wanted too much, or Apple or Meta didn't want to pay enough, right? And that's how this has happened. Ultraleap is finding its way into a whole lot of the other devices
Yeah.
that are out there that aren't these major platform companies. And I think we'll be surprised because, like, you take an example of like Google, right? I think Google at this point would miss the boat if they didn't install Ultraleap as like a hardware partner.
Yeah, I mean, with Meta, they had a hand tracking company that they acquired as one of their first ever acquisitions back when they were Oculus, right? This was Nimble Tech they acquired that was already doing this. They, I think, announced they acquired another computer vision company. At this stage, like, computer vision as an industry has become so big and so filled with talent that I don't think this is something that a company strictly needs to do, right? This is something that if you have the money and you can hire the best people, you can throw a few computer vision researchers at this and get this done in a few years. Getting it to be really good is a different question, right? Because we've seen Pico really, really struggle to get their hand tracking to be good. It's getting better with every update, but it's still not quite with Meta's. Apple, strangely, their hand tracking was only limited by the fact that they didn't provide developers with the full update rate until Vision OS 2, and they didn't provide prediction. They've managed to solve that. I think Google has enough computer vision talent that they can do this. They already have like a open source library to do hand tracking on smartphones. But Ultraleap, for now, it seems to have found its success in integrating it into smaller companies' headsets. So we see it in Lynx, we see it in Varjo as an optional add-on, we see it in Somnium VR1, the PC VR headset that we don't want to talk about today because we don't have enough time, but I'm going to go see in person at its launch event on July 12th. And in the episode after that, I'll talk to you about what I thought of it. It has an option where you can put in Ultraleap. So you do see companies doing it. I think even before Pico 4, Pico Neo 3, they had a attachment for it so that you could add eye tracking if you're a business, or hand tracking, sorry, if you're a business. But you're right, it's going to be a much tougher challenge. If you'd had a company that didn't have experience in computer vision, though, say Amazon wanted to jump in, I could absolutely see them doing something like Leap Motion, and you get that.
And Tobii is the other one that I see our commenters bringing up and talking about. But Tobii is the eye tracking company in lots of headsets, and they face the same sort of situation where platforms were buying their own eye tracking companies and developers, while also, like the industry leading solution is known as Tobii to many people. So like to David's point, if someone like Amazon wanted to spin up a headset as quickly as they could to compete, you go and find companies like Ultraleap or Tobii. And to our audience, we just want to provide context for those people in our audience that are new to this, don't understand what's going on. Those names don't actually matter too much to the end user, and they're not going to matter too much to the end user for many years to come. But these technologies that they provide, eye tracking, hand tracking, are going to be fundamental, and we're basically unfolding the way these things are going to roll out into our lives. Let's move on, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to finish that off, if you have a PlayStation VR 2, it's using Tobii's eye tracking, right? Like Sony, we actually know Sony was researching it internally, and obviously it felt that its eye tracking wasn't up to the quality that they could do with an external supplier, Tobii. With Apple and Meta, though, they rolled their own solution. Quest Pro is Meta's own internal eye tracking. Apple Vision Pro is Apple's. But again, both of these companies, Meta and Apple, acquired startups that were doing the same thing as Tobii. This wasn't, there is this obviously debate about, if you acquire a startup and then you pour in, $100 million and hire a bunch of experts to come work with them and then build their technology from a prototype into shipping, do you call it the startup's technology, or is it the big companies? The answer is it's a ship of Theseus question, right? It's both.
Yep. Well, let's move on here. We've still got quite a lot of show to get through here. I think we'll speed up, but we will get into some conversations later on. David, what did you just throw up there?
So Meta Horizon Worlds, Meta's metaverse platform, is now rolling out to all countries where Quest headsets are sold. So it was only in a few countries. It was in like the US, Canada, France, Spain, the UK, and Iceland, I think. And now it's coming to anywhere else. So this is a rollout that is starting this week, and Meta says it will take a few months. So gradually they will make it available to everyone in a country where Quest is officially sold. So if you were someone who was sitting around waiting for Horizon Worlds and you really wanted it, but you didn't have it in your country, that's going to be good for you. The only thing I would say about this Horizon Worlds in general is that it has vastly improved in the past few years. It is a very, very different platform. If your mental model of Horizon Worlds is still of these like legless avatars in a bland, empty cartoon landscape from 3 years ago, try it out. That's not at all what it looks like anymore. There are legs. There were legs added last year. A lot of the worlds now are built by professional game studios that Meta has contracted out that use, your typical professional 3D modeling and texturing tools, the same way they would with a typical video game. They have it on web and mobile now, so you can access it on the web and mobile. And they've just been adding a lot of polish and features over time that makes it very, very different from what it was when it launched. And we've seen that reflected in success, right? Since February, in the US, Horizon Worlds has been in the top 10 currently most played Quest apps. That's something that if you had told someone that a few years ago, they would not have believed you. This was, I think like number 25 usually at best. It was a platform that even Meta itself in a leaked meeting a few years ago said just had not reached product market fit. And they've dumped so much investment into this. I'm sure it is, not fair to compare this to other apps that have spent 1% of the investment and done better. We have to point out that even though it's in the top 10, Rec Room, VR Chat, and Roblox are still way ahead of it. They're all in the top 5. This is usually hovering around like 7, 8, or 9. But it's still a massive change. This gets the most improved award, even if it doesn't get the best award.
Meh. Well, when Horizon OS hits, when this update becomes more official, and you see Horizon Worlds in your menu bar, and you see requests to join games with other people in your menu bar, you get pop-ups all the time. Like one downside, like there's do not disturb functions on Apple Vision Pro, and I didn't realize I needed to use it in order to stay immersed in like a fully immersive VR experience. I could be in the What If experience, a fully realized story that's like 45 minutes to an hour, and boom, you get your text messages, you get your phone calls, Discord pop-ups, all these little distracting things that come up in your immersive experience because of the social layer that Apple has pushed in as just part of their operating system, right? Meta has spent the better part of a decade trying to figure out what their own social layer looks like, and this is what their social layer looks like, and it's going to be on every Horizon OS headset you go and get. It's in the name. How annoying is that going to be at the same time that it's going to be, your passport to all of your friends on every one of their headsets?
Yeah, the naming is definitely going to be a nightmare. Just to call out that Apple Vision Pro thing, that is annoying, right? Because on Quest, one thing they do that's really nice actually is that when you open an immersive VR experience, it automatically turns on Do Not Disturb until you come out of it, unless you can opt out of that. I'm not sure. Maybe I've missed it. Maybe there might be a setting in Vision Pro for that. If there isn't, that's a big oversight, because Apple knows when you're in an immersive experience, right? You have that pop-up that comes up and says, please be aware of your surroundings and be safe. Why can't that also drive Do Not Disturb? That would be great, because when I'm on Quest,
it should. I didn't use I have yet to use Do Not Disturb because I did not realize I needed to use it to keep those notifications away.
But what I'm saying is, on Quest, it automatically activates when you're in an immersive VR experience. So I'm wondering if Vision Pro has a setting for that, because on Quest, I'm sitting there in the home space, I see my WhatsApp messages pop up, I see my Messenger messages pop up. But what I don't see is any of that once I go into an experience, because I think you can even see maybe now in Quest, it says like Do Not Disturb has been activated, or maybe that was only in a PTC. But yeah, back to this. The naming is going to be a effing nightmare, right? Because it used to be that when you said Horizon, everyone knew that you were talking about this Horizon Worlds, but now Horizon is going to be Horizon OS, the system software. So we're going to talk about once they actually properly do this rename. They say they have, but they haven't in any of their actual communications. Eventually, it'll be not Quest V69. It'll be Horizon V69, which will mean the system software, Horizon OS, and then also the Horizon Store. So you'll say will we say this game is now on Horizon, or will we say is now on Horizon Store? That's going to be a nightmare. we've seen some data miners of the Meta Quest smartphone app say that it looks like that's going to be renamed to Meta Horizon. So the app you will use to control your Quest headset will be called Meta Horizon, but it will not be this Horizon.
So I want to
Yep.
respond to Sirius's comment here. So Sirius, I'm gonna declare war on you here, maybe. But Apple doesn't have a social layer. Does it mean that Meta Horizon will come onto Apple eventually? Apple does have a social layer. It is FaceTime and messages. It's at the very core of the Vision OS operating system. If you go on the left, you've got apps, people, and I can't remember the environments, right? Those are the three things that you can access on, from your home screen: apps, people, and environments, right? And that's the core of their operating system. People don't think of that as a social layer because it isn't built for public posting. It's all built for private one-to-one or one-to-three or, small group communications. They have no interest in that social layer dealing with any of the issues that come with public posting on the internet. Like, you've got a private place where you interact with all these things, but to not call that a social layer and to not consider it as fundamental to what Apple's offering is a miss. Now, the other part of that question, though, is what are the chances Meta Horizon comes to Apple Vision Pro? I've installed and purchased multiple apps from the Apple Vision Pro store to try to run Meta Horizon Worlds as a browser window on Apple Vision Pro. And I've done the same thing with WhatsApp, as well as the entire, Meta View is their app for managing content that comes off of the Meta glasses. These companies are in an all-out, drag-out fight to the death of platform supremacy. And we're encountering all the ways these platforms are like, well, can I do this on this platform? Am I allowed to do this on this platform? Can I do this to this and get that platform to there? And there is no way right now to enjoy Meta Horizon Worlds. I guess you could do it via Mac Virtual Display and then mirror the Mac Virtual Display up to an Apple Vision Pro, and then you enjoy a flat screen Meta Horizon World. But you're going to the very core here of how does Meta get a web-based social layer that runs everywhere the same way Facebook does? Well, they're going to have to compete with the layers that are being developed by other platforms.
Ideally, I think they would, if they did want to bring a Vision Pro, ideally they would want to have it as an actual immersive VR app, right? That's what the best way to use Rec Room, the best way to use Horizon Worlds, the best way to use VR chat is in VR. A flat screen version of it where you're just looking at the world through a little rectangle does not compare, right? We're all watching this show because we believe that, and I think it's just true. You put a headset in someone's head, it's a completely different thing to putting a rectangle in front of them. But when it comes to Apple's social layer, I think what people were talking about was VR and AR, and they do have that. It's called spatial personas, and not only do they have it, but it's across the whole OS. If you have another Vision Pro owner that's on the other side of the planet, they will appear as a near photorealistic spatial persona, and you can share any window you have open. It's like a magical screen sharing system that you can share anything you have open, and as long as it isn't DRM'd, and you can exist in a space together. If you are in a multiplayer game, it just works. It transfers over from you being in the home screen to you being in the game. Now, there are obviously quirks that are part of bugs, but like for me, I found it works great. I mean, everything seems to not work for you, Ian, but when I tried it, it just works. It works for me. I go into FaceTime, I hit spatial call, and I open an app, and that app's there with the person. I drag a 3D model into out of a web browser and put it in front of me, and the other person sees it there. It just all magically works for me.
I'll take it a step further, where I've got the app ALVR, the open source app for streaming PC to various headsets, any headset you want. We've got Guy Godin, who does virtual desktop, which is not open source. They've been building that as a utility for many, many years. But ALVR is out there as this open source solution for streaming. You pop open ALVR on an Apple Vision Pro, and then you start a FaceTime call, and you share your screen to the FaceTime call, and suddenly you are going through whatever you want on your PC with someone watching what you're doing from your perspective. and that goes to Daniel Leeper's comment here. Most of us are watching this on a flat screen rather than in VR. And yeah, we get that. Like we've had to go through the early viewers of the show, still occasional viewers popping into the comments once in a while going, "What the hell is this? Why are those memes talking?" We've gotten through that here. And we also are aware that there's a big audience out there that wants to sit out there with us. But there's a bigger audience of people that can just launch a flat screen. And so it's like we're at the very heart of this thing right now where everyone wants a platform that extends from flat to VR on the fly and does all these things we want it to, but no one has built it and they're all trying to.
Well, I mean, I guess Rec Room has, right? Like, they haven't launched on Vision Pro yet, to be clear. Rec Room is still working on it. They do plan to be on Vision Pro in full VR. But if you take Vision Pro out of the equation, you can jump on your Xbox and play Rec Room, and then go into the other room and pick up your Quest, and you're using your same account. VR chat, obviously, they've started expanding to mobile, but if you're on PC, you can go from flat screen and you can put on your PC VR headset and jump into.
All right, Spatial Big's making a tease here, saying I'm the better user experience test than David. I like that. I'm going to, as an example here, Razer. Back in the day, I went to their OS VR 2 headset demo, and they had a game that was much like Wipeout playing. And they had a camera up on the TV, or it was near one of the other things. So they had cameras up here, and I'm like, oh, well, there's going to be 6DoF tracking here. There's the thing right there. And so I go into the Wipeout game and lean around, and I don't see any of that movement reflected in my headset. And they tell me right after, oh, that camera wasn't, like, there's no precisional tracking at all for that demo. They didn't tell me that until after the demo, and I spent a good hour trying not to throw up my food, because it was so uncomfortable. That was my mistake. I should have verified that it didn't have positional tracking. But, when you see these cameras around, you would assume it would provide your positional tracking. Yeah. Anyways, I want to bring up that example as like, yeah, I wrote about that because the user experience there was absolute dog shit. And, you can't be selling headsets that are doing that to people.
In defense of Razer, this was called the Open Source VR Hacker Development Kit. So I don't know if there was any kind of guarantee of quality there. I don't think this was being sold as some kind of like super duper consumer product. This was very much so. I think you had to like put it together. I can't even remember. You had to put it together. Did you know? They sold it to you in parts, and the whole idea was it was going to be upgradable. And everyone was talking about, oh, this is so much cooler than the Rift and the Vive. It's upgradable, and just like every upgradable product ever, except for the Framework laptop, which is like the only company that has ever made this concept work. It sucked.
I like Sirius out there who's just listening to us on audio today, and I appreciate that too. We try to keep in mind those audio listeners when we talk about things, so it's cool to hear you listening to us in your car. Let's move on, David. We got to get through this. Did you not talk about Live? Did we decide not to talk about Live today, or did you move that somewhere else?
I think we accidentally skipped it, so we're going to have to talk about that now. We will talk about the fact that Meta has deprecated its own first-party third-person Quest capture solution, and it will support Live instead. Live being the tool that has been doing this for many years, since 2016. Live being the tool that was used to build many of the trailers for the original HTC Vive launch lineup. If you have no idea what we're talking about here, it's this idea of using a real-life external camera to record someone that's using VR in third person and then composite them in to the VR world. So this requires kind of having something running on the headset and having this second virtual camera that is at the same position as a real camera, rendering their position. So currently how this works on Quest is that the game itself is obviously running on the Quest, and then a separate kind of multiplayer, in a sense, client camera is running on the PC. So you get the highest quality graphics, and it's matched up to the same position as an external camera. And so with this partnership that Meta is deprecating its own tool that did the kind of same thing, but not as well as Live, Meta has funded Live. So this is involving money. This isn't just like a partnership of happiness and hope. This is involving money. They've funded them to add support for mixed reality. So you can now get this PC camera that will support Quest's mixed reality, will support Quest hand tracking, will support scene understanding, and easily build trailers for mixed reality titles using Live. That's what's currently just arrived in beta, and it's going to get brought out in stable later this year, as well as come to Unreal, because right now it's only for Unity. Another thing that's going to come, separate to what just launched, is a Quest native SDK from Live, one that runs fully standalone on your Quest, does not require a PC, and will allow you to capture first or third person footage. Now, you may say, Quest can already record first person footage. You go to the camera, and it's part of the system interface, and you hit record. True. But what this will do is record in wider field of view and with better stabilization, because it's using that wider field of view. So it's not recording either of your two eyes. It's spawning a magical third eye that has a wider field of view and is better stabilized. Obviously, that has a performance hit. So this is not designed to be used all the time. This is not designed to be used by users. This is for developers that are trying to make a trailer for their game. It's for certain content creators that want to capture the absolute best footage without a PC. In general, though, the best way to do this that isn't going to kill your Quest battery is through a PC. When I say kill, I just mean drain. It's not going to damage it in any way, because to do this, they have to like clock the GPU and CPU all the way up. So that Quest Creator Kit is really interesting. But the bread and butter here is still going to be this PC solution, and this partnership is meaning that it can do mixed reality on Quest 2. Liv points out that this does not take away from their current existing Steam VR offering. The app will still be distributed through Steam, and they claim there is no exclusivity here. Meta is not putting any requirements on them whatsoever, so they could use the same technology and port to Apple Vision Pro or Pico in future if that became something that they wanted to do.
Yeah, I remember doing some of that early mixed reality capture, and it was so cool, but such a pain in the butt, and Live makes it a lot easier. We talked a little bit about Live yesterday during the showcase pre-show, because David had just put that article out, and Lev was in our comments, having watched that. Yeah, it simplifies a very hard thing, and the more places that mixed reality capture goes, the more people are going to see what VR is really capable of across platforms, right? You go look at our showcase, you've got an incredible mixed reality capture video from Laserdance. So the developer Thomas Van Bowel built a stabilization rig to hold the Quest 3 as he's filming on the Quest 3, as he's moving through the room to show that mixed reality footage. Well, that's a developer, one of the most innovative, working at the very cutting edge, trying to figure out, how do I show this game out in the best possible way possible? Well, what if anyone with an iPhone or an Android camera could point at the person in the VR headset and see this composite in real time? That's the goal. That's where we are hopefully moving towards, and we hopefully Liv is able to get there.
Yeah, they did have an app for this a few years ago, but for all sorts of technical reasons, they took that down. That's probably going to be the end goal, right, in a few years. For now, that's not where they are. It's still a external camera attached to a PC. On the Quest native tool I was talking about, to be clear, this is going to be something that each developer has to implement. But once they do, that's something that they don't have to build out themselves. And to be clear, the Quest native one is only for VR, right? So you get a first or a third person camera in VR. But I mean, that would be great, right? Because if your favorite game implements this one day, you see an update on their feed. We just added Live. That means that there's going to be a little interface in its menu that you can pull up a virtual third person camera behind you and hit record, and instead of just having your first person view, it's going to be like a cool view of your avatar, moving around the world. And say it's a sword game, you're going to see like you swinging your sword around, and that's going to be really cool, right? Because this is something that there's nothing stopping any specific developer from building this right now, except for the fact that it's a lot of work to do right. Doing like the video encoding here in an efficient way and having this all work very well is something that a lot of developers just don't have the time to prioritize. And Liv's hope here is that this SDK for native will just be a drop-in solution. And I think they say that Gorilla Tag is going to add it, for example. So we're going to start seeing like third-person footage from Gorilla Tag on Quest native. It's just, this is great news for developers that are trying to make great trailers for their game. And it's great news for content creators like YouTubers that want to show the disc tech off well, because this this way of doing third-person mixed reality in the old sense of compositing real footage into VR, it just shows what it feels like to be in a VR game better than first-person footage. Because one of the biggest problems of VR that we don't talk about enough, because we've talked about it so many times in years past, is still this problem that you cannot show in any really great way what it feels like to be in VR on a flat screen. So many times you see this VR game trailer and you see like the classic people who haven't bought a headset that say, "Oh, this looks bad." And then you can put that same person, I would argue, into a VR headset in that game, and they'll go, "Holy shit, this is so cool! I'm in the game. This wasn't just like a button I'm pressing. I'm holding the sword, and I'm attaching the handle, and I'm slicing someone's head off, and I'm pulling my these are completely different things of flat screen and VR. And that's one of the ways that Liv's technology, this third person composited footage, really helps for. It's that marketing problem that VR still has.
Yeah, and then after that, we'll see what happens with production tools. Once these tools get really efficient and good, and you start imagining all of the AI tools that are in development, there were promises in the early days of production pipelines that integrated VR headsets, and that's true. It has actually happened. There are some of the biggest developer or biggest directors in the world are putting on VR headsets to visualize their shots before they're actually filmed, before they're actually captured and set to tape. But you can put on a camera, you put on a headset and say, I want the camera to go this way through the scene across the animals. And you could then, path out the camera. Well, there's multiple tools that do this, but they've all been constrained by what the tech is actually capable of. And it's like, if you get really seamless mixed reality footage, if you get this compositing done right, well, why can't you swap out the person in the scene with a fully functional avatar that matches the headset wearer? And that's what I'd love to see, is what
Yeah,
happens with
that's been
that.
Liv's focus for years, hasn't it? This idea of also swapping in an avatar instead of the real person. I'm just going to reply to a comment here from anti-cleric Blair Renault, the developer of Technolust and Lo-Fi, saying that got dark fast. I'm actually thinking of a real experience with someone I know who's a big fan of The Walking Dead, and I'd sent them footage one time of The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners video VR game, and when they'd seen footage on like their phone, they were like, "Yeah, meh." And then they came and tried it, and that's the reaction I was relaying.
So,
I'm not actually personally a fan of that kind of what would people say, gratuitous violence, but
well,
loads of people do, right? That's people play violent video games all the time, right? It's Mortal Kombat in the 90s, The Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners in VR. All that kind of violence happens in video games? It's not real.
no. Let's take it a step back away from his horrifying scene. Walt of the Wizard. Go check out that game. In the game, you're a wizard. It's basically like Sorcerer's Apprentice. You've got this table in front of you with a whole bunch of doohickeys, magical items to mess with, and one of them is a little talking skull. And that talking skull is filled with just a bunch of random dialogue that activates in various ways. And about, I don't know, 2 months ago, they went viral on TikTok and elsewhere because someone started posting silly playground-esque videos, the same sorts of things that you've seen out of Job Simulator and what David's describing here, of people looking at that little skull and going, shut up, Scully, and throwing him out a window as he's screaming out into the distance, and you hear his voice fall away, right? You're giving people a playground to film in, right? And that's going to drive social media for the next 10 years, in my opinion, right? You're going to see videos filled with people just screwing around in VR doing the most ridiculous things like he's describing over here.
Yeah, or the most violent things in the way I was describing. But I still maintain this is part of video games. We can't shy away and pretend it. The Mortal Kombat moral panic happened in the 90s. We are 30 years away from that. It happened. It's over.
My kid
The
is
moral panic
standing
ended.
with a severed head that's bleeding onto my floor, right?
Yeah.
We're 6 months away from that video.
I mean, yeah, it didn't turn everyone crazy. Violent crime, it went down. It didn't go up.
All right, David, we're going to have to match. You're right. Like, I get the moral panic, but can you match that with the fact that presence is a different quality? that you feeling present in a place is more personal than that moral panic on flat screens.
Sure. I mean, yes, but there are examples of where people engage in this kind of thing even when it's entirely real, right? There are horror experiences that people go to in real life where actors do this exact same thing, right? You have a zombie or a monster that severs someone's head and there's blood, there's fake blood everywhere. I think the important thing is here the distinction between fantasy and reality, right? If you're engrossed in a book where the most horrible things are happening and your mind is so engaged in that that you don't even know where you are, right? You're not in your living room anymore. You're there in your head. That book is putting you in that place almost as much as any virtual reality experience. Does it matter if something horrible is happening as long as at the end of the day you put the book down, you pick up your coffee and you understand the distinction between fantasy and reality? It's going to be a really interesting discussion as VR gets more real, right? That is a valid discussion. I'm not shying away from it, but this has been a moral panic for hundreds of years. People said this about books. People said this about radio. People said this about films and TV, and video games too. I mean, we've all played or seen Mortal Kombat. Think of things that are happening in that game.
No, you brought Mortal Kombat into this, and I'm imagining the fatalities, right? And just how viciously how they got even more grotesque over each generations, right? Like they got more violent and silly with how I remember all the different ways, like you could have different sets of fatalities at the end of the game. But it's a matter of how many hours you're doing this, what the ages are of the people doing it, and how many millions of people are doing it, right? Like, and again, you're pantomiming this stuff. You're not viewing it on a flat screen with button presses. So yeah, we will get into that another time, but I felt it was important that we at least address that it is a complex issue. As much as I respect David's sort of pushback there, I'm seeing people already talk about what was
I'm
the
sure
one,
people
Night Trap.
will have many views on this, but when you're in paintball and or airsoft and you shoot your friend in the chest, you're pantomiming it, right? You're doing the exact same motion as if you were shooting them in the chest with a real rifle, but it's not.
David, okay, so
fantasy.
All right. Oh man, you're going to take me right to military tools, right? We don't have the time for a military
we actually
tool.
do have a topic about that coming up, so maybe we'll move back to that.
Well, let's get on to that.
Well, it's not our next topic, but our next topic is Logitech MX Ink and Sony standalone headset. And the reason we're bundling these together is that they're both about creatives. They're about this idea of using VR for 3D and even 2D creativity. So Sony's headset is actually entirely focused around that use case. And with MetaQuest, Meta has partnered with Logitech to bring out a accessory that is specifically focused around this. And so the reason we're also talking about them together is because Ian will give you his impressions of Sony's headset that he tried at AWE. And we'll ask the question, is this dedicated headset that's going to cost a lot more and use these specific controllers good enough to warrant being better than a $130 pen that you buy for your Quest? So this is going to be the first ever third-party tracked controller for MetaQuest headsets. It's this stylus right here. It's Logitech MX Ink. It is supported by Meta. It will pair to your Quest headset, apparently according to the two companies, in like a seamless process that ends with a tutorial. It can be used for 2D and 3D. So in 2D, it has pressure sensitivity. In 3D, you have buttons and haptics. And this is fully 6DoF tracked in the same way the controller is by infrared LEDs that are underneath the plastic. It will work on Quest 2 and Quest 3 officially. It is being reported that Quest Pro will work too, but is not officially supported. And the following apps will support it at launch, which should happen in late September. Those apps are Gravity Sketch, Painting VR, Archeo, Engage, OpenBrush, the open source port of Tiltbrush, Gesture VR, Shapes XR, and additionally, it will be supported in two PC VR apps, Adobe Substance Modeler and Eleusis by Realize Medical. I have never said that one out loud. The point is, it's going to also work over a PC VR link in certain apps, as well as being in those 8 or so native Quest apps. The one app that they did not have at launch, which we're really surprised by, and the developer was surprised by, is Vermilion. So they have painting VR, but they don't have the other Quest painting app, which subjectively I prefer personally, Vermilion. And that's really surprising to me. If there are any Vermilion fans in our comments, please let me know, because I think Meta and Logitech have made a big mistake by not working with its developer.
Yeah, James bringing up the idea that Touch Pro, which had a little nib on it, a little like pen tip attachment you could attach to the bottom of this Touch Pro controller. Right, it's still on the bricked Touch controller that I have that I keep complaining about. Then James also saying they killed off workrooms which had whiteboarding in it to write on, even though like we've complained about it for years, and it goes like Meta has a bunch of cool ideas. They just put them at the wrong layers of the system in a lot of places. So seeing these things disappear that were tried out a couple of years ago and get replaced by this is a pretty big deal. I love David when he was writing about this MX Ink. He was pointing out how it looks like Logitech and Meta might get there first, even though you also wrote the headline about the Apple Pencil Pro being a perfect device to use in the exact same way as this is, except, Apple hasn't done it yet, right? So here's Meta showing a real effort to do more than just gaming in VR and to do it on the right time scale this time, right? Like they're looking like they're going to be able to ship this before Apple, and that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, unless Apple comes out of nowhere and adds that feature, this is supposed to ship in late September. It's the same price as an Apple Pencil Pro. Everyone thought that Apple was going to do this with Pencil Pro eventually, at least, right? And there were a lot of people predicting that at WWDC it was going to be announced, but it didn't happen. And then after all that kind of disappointment from creatives who really wanted this, it's more important on Vision Pro because Vision Pro right now is just hand tracking, right? There are no tracked controllers. You don't get 6-DoF tracking from a handheld object. So Pencil Pro on Vision Pro would not only be just kind of a nice to have, it would be like a game changer, because then you have a 6-DoF tracked precision controller that's usable for all sorts of things.
A magic wand,
great, right?
A magic wand.
Sorry?
You could have a magic wand, right? It's literally the feel of a magic wand in your hand, and there's plenty of games that would benefit from that instantaneously. The one I just mentioned, Waltz of the Wizard, would instantaneously benefit from having a wand to use to express all that magic.
Yeah. The thing about this is it's interesting that it will also work as an emulated touch controller. They're going to allow it to be used even in apps that weren't built for it beforehand, and it will kind of pass through its buttons as touch controller buttons. But obviously it's going to work best in the apps that are designed around it. And they're allowing you, as you can see in this image, to mix and match with touch controllers. They actually say the headset will track both touch controllers and the pencil, the stylus, at the same time. So you can literally just put down a touch controller, pick up the stylus at any time and switch between them, or have one hand that has just hand tracking, presumably if this supports multimodal, and another hand that has the stylus. So yeah, this is a really interesting product from a technical perspective. They're also going to sell an accessory called Inkwell, where you can dock it in and have it just sitting ready to go anytime on your desk. And they'll also sell like a little mat. So there's clearly a lot of effort gone into this. Anyone who's been around in VR for a very long time is going to know that this is not Logitech's first stylus, right? They actually did make a VR ink. So this is called MX Ink. They made a VR ink for the HTC Vive, well, any Steam VR tracked headset back in the day. The difference is that cost $750, whereas this costs $130. And also, this looks like a normal stylus. It had like a big ring with photo sensors on it.
Our commenters are absolutely in shambles. We've destroyed them. They can only think of ways of killing people with pencils now because of your conversation, and they want to see video of you doing it. So
I think like those kind of games. This is a friend of mine that likes The Walking Dead. It's not really my thing. I'm not into.
Well, they still want it, David. So you're not giving the people what they want anymore. All right, I want to talk about Sony's headset, because this is a good transition to me getting to try Sony's headset. It was unexpectedly at this conference down in Long Beach, and yeah, I put it on, and I was very underwhelmed by it. This is the same chipset supposedly that's running inside of the Quest 3, and
no, it's the higher end variant of that chipset. So this is going to be in Samsung's headset,
Okay,
visor, that Chinese headset, and an undisclosed HTC
that's right.
headset.
And yeah, it has two controllers. So this had a very much a reference design feel to it. This felt like a Qualcomm reference design, which I've seen those over the period, and they're proof of concepts. It's like the when Qualcomm does a reference design, it always needs optimization, it seems, to really make it sing as well as it could. But the problem here for me was the controllers. I David was asking me to break down the visuals in there. It looked like it was a smaller field of view, but it was hooked up to a PC, so judging performance was difficult. But these controllers are the things I want to talk about compared to what David just had up on screen. You got a little ring you put up on one hand, and you put this thing in the other so that your hand is ready to pinch over this, and you can do little micro movements with it theoretically. Over on this one, there's a little touch sensor on it. When I first tried gripping it, I had to turn the ring like 90 degrees or 45 degrees around my finger in order to find the right place to press. And like, you're going through an experience with a bunch of windows. They had like a production workflow setup that a director might use to plan a virtual shot, and you would do this little pinch motion on the window to grab it and move the window where you want. And I don't get why a piece of hardware is necessary for any of that. It's already there on Meta and Vision ecosystems to interact with these things with just your open air hand track. Like a pointer device in one hand or a stylus in one hand definitely makes a lot of sense. But I don't see why anyone would go and pick this over even over what Meta's doing, right? And then there's of course the Apple system, that if you're kind of like in that Apple ecosystem as a creative to begin with, you've already invested a bunch of their hardware. It might make sense for you to go and try to get an Apple Vision Pro and get a pencil if they actually supported it, right? They don't yet. So yeah, I see Meta's solution here winning, and I don't see why someone goes and grabs this anytime soon.
Yeah, I guess their pitch here so far is that this is being developed around a specific piece of software, the Siemens engineering software. I wonder if that's what you tried, do you know, or was it just a general piece of demo software?
I asked what software it was, and the engineer said, I can't tell you. So I tried to look at like the code on the screen to see if I could identify some things. I did see it looked like somewhere else I saw the Sony headset, and the PC terminal window said Android 12 somewhere on the PC terminal window, which I thought was really interesting, and I have no idea what to make of that, but I did see it running.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, this thing is running Android, right? It's just running a very basic Android based VR OS. So the good thing about this headset is supposed to be that it uses the same micro OLED displays as Apple Vision Pro. Were you able to see that kind of OLED clarity and quality, or was it kind of killed by the PC VR streaming? Or
yeah, it was killed. It was a huge roadblocker, right? Like if I'm going to want to examine an OLED screen, I'm going to ask for a night scene or a movie to compare to what I've seen in other things. This was like a street scene.
What about resolution? I mean, this should be a near 4K panel, right? Did this look like Vision Pro level? Did it look a big step up of Quest 3 or?
It was running on a laptop, so
yeah, I guess,
I didn't like. It's hard to make any of those things. I don't want to. I was unimpressed with anything else here, right? Like I wasn't impressed. There's no piece of this system that I'm like, I wish I would see that in other headsets.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a software issue, but it does sound like the field of view, for example, is quite disappointing. Although, this is an open periphery design. Am I right in saying? Were you able to see out the sides? And
no, I was in there. I was locked in there.
Okay, wow. Okay, it's not okay.
But I think it has a flip up, which I didn't use.
Yes, you're right. It has
which I didn't
flip up,
use.
which is really cool, right? More headsets should have that. It's great. I guess in the era of pass-through, it's not as important, but there's still going to be times you want to see full quality. Obviously, eventually, once we get to like much higher resolution pass-through, where you're getting close to human vision where it starts to look like a transparent optic, that's when you don't need that. But I do think that you're right, the flip up design of this is very cool. I'd love to see a demo of this running real standalone content, because that's where it should shine. Guy Godin, virtual desktops developer, in our comments said that he also tried it at AWE and also found it disappointing. But I do wonder how much of this is the fact that this was running off a laptop streaming. I would love to see this in standalone. I wonder, do they have any plans for that? Obviously, this is, to be clear, anyone who's not aware, not a consumer headset. It's going to be designed to run a few specific, it's a few specific PC VR software and maybe some standalone stuff. But I guess they're going to sell it to any enterprise that wants it, right? And they're going to run some stuff on it. And in that case, you get a headset with controllers that has Vision Pro's resolution and pass through and flip up. So it could be useful for some companies.
Spatial Biggs making a sort of a general comment about Sony. It seems like a lot of great ideas that would have been better released 2 years ago. I do think that is a useful way of thinking about what Sony has done in the market. I think that summarizes a lot of our arguments over the last couple of years, David, right? We're both arguing about whether Sony is going to do the right thing on the right timeline. And, like, we've got Sony adding PC VR support for the PSVR 2 in August, but did they, should they have gotten that out, the whole headset out a year earlier? And then should they have had that feature out there in a different way? All those questions. And here I'm just seeing, like, I don't know how they make the transition to standalone from this. So
yeah, I guess it's a start in a way. I'm just going to answer, before we move on, a question from Onakazi asking about the chip here. I think they asked that when I brought up the fact that it's not Quest 3s, it's the higher end XR2 Plus Gen 2. And they asked, is it just more RAM? No, that was the approach for the original XR2 Plus that was in Quest Pro, was the idea that it could use more RAM. This is actually higher clocked and supports more cameras and higher resolution displays. So I'll just show some really quick charts for this. So you can see here, the 835 was the chip in the original Oculus Quest. The XR2 Gen 1 was in Quest 2. XR2 Gen 2 is in Quest 3. And the XR2 Plus Gen 2 is what's in Sony's headset. So you see a decent increase in CPU performance, and a more minor but still existing increase in GPU performance. So you're not losing much GPU compared to Quest 3, and but you're losing a little bit of CPU. That's quite significant. The main thing that it does, though, right, these are just higher clocks from higher bin parts. The main thing that it does for companies is it allows them to have higher resolution displays. The base XR2 and Quest 3 cannot output to a near 4K or 4K display. It caps at around 3K. And I don't mean like rendering performance. I mean, it literally cannot output that resolution. Like, it's like having a HDMI cable or whatever that doesn't support it. It literally doesn't support that output. The other thing is that it supports more cameras. So it's how this headset can have eye tracking. It's how, if you wanted to add like face tracking as well. I think the regular base chip supports 6 cameras, 2 pass-through cameras, and 4 tracking cameras. So if Quest 3 wanted to add eye tracking, not only would they have had to add all of the stuff we talked about earlier when it comes to cameras and a bigger battery, they would also have to have actually upgraded the chipset as well to have that many input ports on it for cameras. I can
that here soon, but why don't you wrap up here first before we do that?
That was weird. I saw your mouth moving for a second, but I didn't hear you speak. I did hear you at the end, but at the start I didn't for some reason. Yeah, let's talk about. Wow, we really have a lot of topics today. I'm looking at this and I'm like, goddamn, I can feel this.
Do we want to split it? Do we want to split it into, just continue this another day? Is that
no, I think
for you, or
I can keep going until I collapse. We'll just go. We'll try to just speed it up. Maybe we'll just really briefly talk about a few things. So this Palmer Luckey news, right, where Palmer has confirmed that his headset that he teased is for military, or at least mostly for military. No more details than that, but presumably that means it's going to be through Anduril. I imagine that based on Luckey's repeated comments about preferring pass through to see through that this is going to be a pass through headset. So it'll be really fascinating to see what happens when you really have no cost and materials limit, when you can use materials that are export controlled, for example. We know that Meta has struggled with the idea of wanting to use those in a glasses product, a silicon carbide, for example. But what happens in a pass-through product? What happens when your cost could be like $50,000 per unit? What kind of standalone pass-through headset could you build then? And when you have, the product division of Palmer Luckey, the person that kind of, brought this industry back to life and made some very interesting decisions for the first time. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see what Palmer does with that.
So for context there, a little scampy bring it up, Palmer Luckey and Darshan Shankar, the CEO of Big Screen, both took the stage together for a keynote talk at AWE that was very well attended. I sat in the second row in my Apple Vision Pro and filmed the entire talk with spatial video. Now I have nowhere to put spatial video because there aren't a whole lot of lines to edit. There's 3 clips, so I need to clip them together so you see one continuous shot of this stage, and need a way to actually post spatial video for everyone to watch. But it was a little interesting thing. And in that discussion, Palmer teaches the audience the word teledildonics. So if you don't know what that word means, as Luckey said on stage, the explanation is in the name. And yeah, your Google search is going to get really interesting very quickly. Now, what's interesting is that Big Screen Beyond is that super slim headset. It's also got a wired connection to a PC. So by and large, that is a device that is almost military ready to begin with. Like you could do a lot of things with that platform potentially for the military. Now I'm going to talk about, David, I know you follow military developments pretty closely. Like you follow military technologies. I don't. But something I did at AWE bothered me. So you think about a sniper situation where there's a sniper in a city killing people from a heightened location, and you come up to a wall. You think of all those movies that you've seen where this is depicted, and you've got a little mirror on your hand, and you stick a little piece of gum to the mirror, and you stick it on the end of a little piece of tool, and you put it around the corner and look at the mirror, and then the sniper shoots the mirror right out of your hand, right? That's you've seen it in movies tons of times of how you look around. Well, I can right now take my iPhone out of my pocket, mirror it to my Apple Vision Pro, and put it around the corner of a wall exactly like that mirror, right? I can disconnect my head's view from the view of the lenses of the iPhone. And that's just the beginning. That's just the way in which headsets allow you to look in places where you wouldn't be able to see really easily any other way, right? This infinite landscape of devices, right? And this brings me to a whole other area that we don't ever talk about, David, but do you consider first-person viewer headsets to be VR headsets?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So if anyone's not aware of what we're talking about, these are like headsets that either come with or are sold as accessories for drones, and so that you use them to fly the drone in first person. And they're very compact. And you may wonder to yourself, well, how can these headsets be so compact if we're in this industry still trying to get to that level of compactness? They look like Big Screen Beyond level compactness, but they're much cheaper and they've been out for years and years. The answer is that they have a tiny field of view, right? They are not giving you this like full field of view of the drone. You're seeing the drone in like a rectangle view in front of you. It's like sitting in front of a giant monitor. The reason it's done and head mounted at all is because it's portable, right? It's a portable way to have a big monitor around with you. An interesting parallel to our industry. I don't know if I call those VR, but I guess they're head mounted displays, right? But are they virtual reality? No, I don't even think most of them are head tracked. I don't think. Maybe there's one or two now that are head tracked, as in, rotationally the screen stays in place. But I'm pretty sure most of them, it's just, an image with about half the field of view of a VR headset that's fixed in front of you. And then they're not 3D either, right? Like it's just a 2D image in front of you.
Yeah, so this is I'm at the beginning of my reporting journey on this area, right? I'm telling you all that this is of very high interest to me personally, because I think VR headsets are going to be used as weapons of war. I think they probably are already being used as weapons of war in small ways, and it is
Oh, in
something that we're
Ukraine.
going.
A
Yeah.
100% in Ukraine. There was a documentary recently. If I lost your connection there. If we're still talking about first person view goggles, there was a short documentary recently about a Ukrainian drone pilot who sits in his chair and vapes and wears this first person view goggle and has killed, according to the Ukrainian military unit that he's attached to, over 100 Russian soldiers this way.
Yeah, so that's UploadVR putting reporting, putting it out there that we are interested in this area. We are curious about it. We would like to understand more because, frankly, I don't think the public knows that is happening, that is a fact of this technology, and that is going to be a big future for it, right? So it's one of the reasons I kind of point out again and again, anytime we bring up the company Magic Leap, point out that it is owned by Saudi Arabia now, effectively. And, these headsets are, when you move them to outdoors, when you move to the idea of you wearing them all day, they are potentially the most impactful security concern, personal privacy concern of the 21st century, right? You've got potentially every person you meet having a record of everything you've done online floating directly above your head. And that's just the beginning. And so when you start thinking about first person viewer headsets that don't even have tracking in them, but just because they're a portable viewer and you have aerial borne devices, aircraft that can drop bombs or blow itself up in someone else's vicinity, you've got the recipe for something very, very, very scary.
I mean, yeah, this is already happening in Ukraine. Like, that's how this works. These aren't drones that are firing missiles. This is, as morbid as it sounds, they have a explosive charge attached to them, and they are remotely detonated once they hit someone. So this person is sitting there in their chair with this headset on, seeing a stream from that drone and flying it into the person, upon which, once they
Yeah.
collide with them, they explode the charge, and that's how they kill them.
Yep. So Onakazi is bringing up the movie Toys, and that is near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of times that I think about that movie Toys from the 1990s. Robin Williams, given control of a toy company, or actually doesn't get control of the toy company. His military uncle gets control of that toy company, and then Robin Williams has to convince all of the good toys to destroy the bad toys. But in that movie, they show all these children with wraparound screens controlling military aircraft. And it was a very upsetting thing as a kid to imagine that. And here we are, 30 years later. And these same tools that we talk about for video games are going to play a part in killing people.
Yes. But to bring it back to Palmer Luckey's company, Anduril, from what I understand of looking at the way they currently use VR, this is going to be not for weapons, but for command and control, for data visualization. So Anduril's main product is this lattice software that integrates all these battlefield sensors that are in all of these different platforms together into this one view that is almost like a strategy video game. And as someone pointed out in the comments, they actually did acquire the developer of a strategy video game. And the idea is that you get this view of the entire battlefield that shows, where your friendly units are and their exact status, where the detected enemies are, and it integrates all of the different sensors, be these visual or radar or whatever, and tries to determine using AI, what is this enemy? Is this an enemy drone there? Is there an enemy tank over there? And puts it into this one big view. And the VR version of what they have is that in 3D, right? Instead of a 2D map that's like a strategy game on your screen, you have a miniaturized version, like Google Earth style, of the battlefield that you walk around in VR. if I had to speculate, based on my understanding of what Anduril has done so far, this headset will be a headset designed for that. So this will be designed for military commanders that are in a warehouse or a command and control center of some sort, to in a large open room together in pass-through mixed reality, walk around a floating hologram of the battlefield and be able to point and give commands to different units together in a space. So they're seeing each other through the pass-through cameras. They're seeing a synced up version of the battlefield, and they're able to use that for command and control. That is what I speculate Anduril is working on.
I'm appreciating our commenters, and I'm sorry for laughing as you're describing that, because the commenter made me laugh. Because we've got Not Suspicious, the developer of Airspace Defender, who we debuted in our showcase yesterday, which was Missile Command, but 3D. And Not Suspicious making this joke, looking forward to Anduril's acquisition of Not Suspicious after we release Airspace Defender. Ironic there, funny, because we have gone full circle there. And then I also want to talk about Mr. Mycelium's comment here, and it's a difficult one. Truth be told, I'm not sure I want to know. Maybe this comes from an overly privileged first world viewpoint, but I'm not sure I want my VR news mixed in with the somber topic of war. I understand that. Please show your support for UploadVR.com. Go become a member. I wanted to convey here that we take this seriously, that we believe this technology is transformative beyond games. We believe that everyone is going to be wearing glasses and headsets eventually, and we have to talk about all the uses of those devices and the misuses of those devices. So we're going to get into it. We might not get into it on VR Download. I think I like our tone of talking about industry tech news very often, but I also needed to put out that personal plea because I think Mr. Mycelium's comment there speaks for a lot of people at the same time that people need to know.
Yeah, James O'Loughlin pointing out that VR was sort of started by the military. A lot of the technology in VR was indeed developed for military purposes, augmented reality specifically as well. I mean, some of the first augmented reality was, for example, on the Apache helicopters view, where it was able to overlay things. And I'm sure people have seen the footage of where as they turn their head from the headset's rotation sensor, the actual gun on the front, the cannon, 30mm cannon, moves alongside the head, and that's using the same kind of IMU and head tracking that's used in VR today. The first pancake lenses used in VR, for example, were used in the military decades ago, and the other one was NASA. So it wasn't just the military. NASA also was a huge pioneer of VR technology in the 1980s, but you could call that kind of the military, industrial, aerospace space in general.
Yeah, so let's move on here. Spatial bigness saying sim sickness is a term from flight simulators, and we can go down this route very deeply today. We're not going to go any further down it except to just make that call out that we're watching this and we care about it deeply, and we have please support our work so that we can do more of it. Yeah,
mostly because we have a lot of news to get through, and I can physically feel the sweat dripping off me.
God, let's not kill David in VR from sweat.
Not morbidness, sorry. Even the heat is even. My brain's not working at its full capacity right now, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. So the next category we're going to talk about is Gaussian splatting. This is a new technique, a relatively new technique for rendering photorealistic 3D volumes that works by representing them as a collection of overlapping 3D Gaussian functions. You don't need to know what that means. It's really esoteric. The point is this is a new technique for capturing and representing photorealistic objects and spaces in VR. And the people who are working on this right now, many of them would argue that this will do to photorealistic volumetric capture what large language models did to chatbots. So this is like a exciting, accelerating technology that is going to get us volumetric, photorealistic, real-world captured content much sooner than otherwise, because there's a lot of sort of disappointment right now in capture tech for headsets, right? You've got Apple Vision Pro that came out with this spatial photos, spatial videos, but it's not spatial in the way that people would have thought as in volumetric. It's 3D. Apple came up with a fancy marketing name for stereoscopic video. What these companies are doing, the two companies we're going to talk about today, Gracia and Varjo, is truly volumetric. The captures we're talking about here, you can walk around, not just tilt your head a little, not even, rotate or get a little bit of parallax. You can walk around. These are 3D volumes. And I would recommend you try this out yourself. You can actually try out the Gracia app on Steam or on Quest 3 via SideQuest. So that's the first company we're talking about here. Gracia wants to make a platform. It has made a platform that allows people to upload these volumetric photos to be viewed by others. It wants to one day be the YouTube of volumetric content. That's its big ambition. Whether it gets there, that's not relevant fully to the discussion, but that's its goal. You can see what it's trying to be. It's a platform, and their magic sauce is that they have developed a really fast renderer for Gaussian splatting that can actually run on Quest 3 standalone. And as far as I know, that is the first time that someone has gotten Gaussian splatting running on a mobile chipset in VR at decent resolution with full frame rate. And that's their technical achievement. So they are not the capture tech right now. They are the platform and the viewer, the viewing technology. But their next step that they hope to launch in August is that they are going to be the capture for moving Gaussian splats. So short videos. The time span here, we're talking about, 5 to 20 seconds at first, but is essentially photorealistic video content that you can walk around. So one of the examples they used was of like a boxer, and you're literally able to see someone like fight in front of you. And you can imagine where this is going to go one day. So then one of the next steps is that they want to replace the black background here with pass-through. So you could imagine that someday in the 2030s, you put on your lightweight mixed reality headset and you launch up the UFC. And instead of seeing a flat screen of a camera, the UFC has installed these volumetric capture cameras at the top of the ring. And instead of seeing the ring itself, you see the two fighters in real time, volumetrically fighting in your living room in front of you. And you can stand up and watch them. And you get the sense that there are two people standing in front of you photorealistically in your real room fighting. That's an example of it being used for, MMA as a sport. There are obviously many, many more examples of this technology. That's just a random one I've picked.
Yeah, I don't think people talk about presence in a lot of ways. It's difficult to define. Like it can mean a lot of different things to different people. But I've done my demo. One of the most impactful demos I ever tried was on the DK2. A friend had his PC in a rolling cart and then put on the DK2, and he had a model in 3D of a human body standing there in front of me, represented volumetrically, and I could lean around and really examine details. The effect of going face to face with a person who's volumetrically represented in that detail is something very few in our audience will have experienced. It's something that until you feel like your body reacting the way you would if you got too close to a person in the physical world, like everyone has their own little personal bubble, and you've got different personal bubbles for your family, for your friends, for strangers. And suddenly this completely artificial thing in front of you, you get a few feet from where you wouldn't get that close in the physical world, and you feel uncomfortable. You feel like you've invaded someone's personal space. It's deeply impactful. And that David's, keeps using this word volumetric. Like, I just want to convey that the experience, when you experience and get close to people that are captured in this way, it's night and day compared to every other human you've ever seen represented in VR.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really shocking at first. When you see a photorealistic volumetric human in VR in the first time, it is like the first time trying VR, right? Because you're so used to seeing people in videos and pictures on your phone, on your TV, but right, that's not the same thing as seeing a person in front of you. That same feeling your brain gets when there's an actual person in front of you, it gets when there's this photorealistic volumetric capture. And it's slightly disturbing at first, right? As you say, it's almost weird. You're almost like, what is this? A lot of our commenters are pointing out that we have to say it, right? Like we had that teledildonics conversation before. This is probably going to be huge for porn, right? There is probably going to be a
Uh,
really
it-
big pornography industry that grows out of this
let's
in
call
the
it
coming decade.
telesex. Let's call it telesex because I don't
Well,
think
no,
porn
I mean, you're
applies
not
anymore
having.
there.
I'm not talking about like. Well, I mean, teledildon, whatever. Telesex is you having sex with another person remotely, right? It's like a evolution of the idea of phone sex. This is pornography in the sense of like you're not interacting with them, right? They're just like it's essentially like a stripper in front of you, I guess. This is not what I'd ever thought we'd talk about on VR
Oh my
download, but
gosh.
it's true to say that that is going to be a massive industry. It was pornography was a huge push for VHS. That's not an urban myth. It really was one of the massive accelerators for VHS as a technology. It was for the internet. It was for streaming technology, video real-time streaming on the internet. Pornography was one of the massive accelerators of the innovation there, and it may happen here. Some people are pointing out and asking questions about how this compares to an older technology of light fields. So you're right to say that, for example, you could find like a welcome to light fields demo on Steam that Google made a few years ago. That's very, very impressive. What Gaussian splatting has two main advantages. One is the data size. These worlds, these captures are on the order of megabytes, whereas a lot of the best light field stuff, it's going to have to be on the order of gigabytes. You're talking about like a 1 to 2 order of magnitude difference in the amount of data. The other is in capture. With light field content, you need these giant, expensive light field cameras, or you need to use like a bunch of regular cameras attached together. For capturing stills of Gaussian splats, you can do it with your phone. You can go right now and to the App Store and download Luma, which is the most popular software for uploading to Gracia. Luma on your iPhone, and you can capture an object volumetrically right now with the iPhone you have in your hand. No magical capture tech. Now, for video, it's going to be a little bit more intensive than that. Gracia says that they will be able to, with 20 GoPro cameras, capture video. So you surround the person, say this dancer in this demo, for example, with 20 GoPro cameras, and from that they can generate a volumetric video. That sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's not compared to what it used to take. It used to take like 100 or 200, and they used to have like a lot of specialized calibration, and a lot of the time you had to do this in like a completely white room that's been set up. They're claiming here you just throw 20 cameras and the system figures all that out. Gaussian splatting, if the hype is real, I mean, I've tried this. You can try this on your Quest 3. I think James O'Loughlin asked on standalone, does it only work on Quest 3? Yes. They said that the Quest 2 is not powerful enough to do this in real time. The Quest 3 is. They're working on Apple Vision Pro support with even higher quality. You can try this right now. Go to SideQuest, type in Gracia and install it in your Quest 3. If you have a PC that supports VR, like it's good enough for VR, you can get it on Steam in even higher quality. Try it out for yourself. It's really great. Are we ready to talk about the other Gaussian splatting tool, which is coming from Varjo? You'll know Varjo as the company that makes these high-end XR headsets for PC. This is a kind of tangential side business that they've now started that they call Varjo Teleport, and it will work on initially all PC VR headsets. And they say they too hope to bring it to standalone. And their pitch here is about using an iPhone again. They're making this Varjo Teleport for iPhone to scan an entire scene. And they say it will take about 10 minutes. So with 10 minutes, you can capture an entire scene. Like you're in a warehouse, you're in a factory, you're in your home, you're in your living room. They can even do outdoor scenes, which is absolutely wild. And I've tried this. I got to try this, and it works, and it really is high quality. It's quite stunning that this was done in 10 minutes with an iPhone. They capture like an entire outdoor market. And yeah, you're able to use the thumbstick to actually move around this capture that's been done with a phone. This is like an entirely new thing for people to be able to do this themselves and view it on a headset. And yeah, we're going to see with Gaussian splatting and with better evolutions of it, a revolution in real-time capture and volumetric content.
Yeah, our commenters, I think, are still going off of the earlier discussion, and I appreciated the comment that we ended up with an Upload After Dark episode here, basically talking about the things we don't normally get into, but it's sort of naturally drifted into that way, into that direction, because they are big uses of the technology. With this one in particular, Varjo, I remember they had a 3D scan. It was one of the first things I think they ever really showed in Varjo was let's really show off the display, all the extra pixels that we've packed into this display using a 3D scan of like a workshop. Well, to your point, it's getting a lot easier to do those captures, and they're getting spit out all the time. But our commenters are bringing up the fact that, in the real world, there are certain things you're not allowed to scan. The other day, I so it was really cool. I used Polycam to scan. They put in a dragon head into Times. Where is it? Grand Central Station in New York. So there's a dragon skull, just like in the show, located in Grand Central Station. I took Polycam and I just scanned the whole thing. And then I sent it to Apple Vision Pro, my Apple Vision Pro group, and they translated the file for me so that it could play on any device and could pull up right in front of me. The scan was terrible. Like I couldn't get the top of the dragon because of how the scan worked. And this is one of the best scanning apps, right? How do these apps fill in the gaps, get it up to speed, and then how do we have policies like in place, or like, are we going to have signs up, no scanning allowed of this location? One of our writers just got in trouble for taking a photo in a public location.
I mean, I was going to say there's no photos allowed in many locations. You go to a lot of sites in the world, and they're going to say that. I think will one day those signs change to no photos or captures? Maybe just no captures as your generic term. I mean, essentially how these things work, right, is that they take like a huge number of photos. Like on this app, it's presented as if you're taking a video, but it's just taking continuous photos and then stitching them all together. And to be clear, the actual generation here is not done on your phone. It's done on a cloud server in AWS. So it takes 10 minutes to capture with your iPhone, and then it all gets sent off to a server that takes like 3 or 6 hours, something on that order, to process it, and then it comes back down to you to view in your headset. And Varjo actually say that if you sign up for this early access, they're going to have that for free for now, which is pretty interesting. So if you're interested in this, you can go to our article about this where we have a link to the sign up, or you can just just Google Varjo teleport and you'll see the sign up there. And yeah, I was really, really impressed by the quality of this. I think the one you're talking about uses nerfs, which is another technique. But this is Gaussian splatting, which I've found, the quality is going to vary based on the capture, of course, but I was shocked by the details that I could see in some of these captures, like tiny text and things like that. And the other really cool thing is the lighting, right? The fact that it gets the reflections and all right. It's wild. I mean, we're talking about a whole new type of content arriving to VR headsets here. Like that's not cartoon renders like what you're seeing my avatar right now. It's not, these video game style things. It's more like photography in a completely new way. It really is wild. And one of the applications you can imagine here that Varjo is optimizing around is for remote collaboration for a business. So say you've just set up a site in a factory or something. Today, a lot of the time, if you're doing this in Taiwan or China, some of the companies, people would then fly over and look around it with you and check that everything's okay. Well, what happens if you could just scan it and then they put on a headset and they're in the room there with you? And the end goal here, and I don't expect this to happen anytime soon, this is another 2030s thing that we always like to say, and sometime in the 2030s, is that your headset could capture and generate in real time in seconds. And then what you could do then is, I think we talked about this before with the idea of Vision Pro's spatial personas, is imagine putting your headset on and your friend joins you in your living room and they see your living room. Because right now on both Quest and Vision Pro, you can join each other as avatars in pass-through, but you're each in your own living room. You don't have a shared spatial context. You've probably seen some YouTubers and people have posted videos of, oh, look, someone came and joined me in my living room, and you see their meta avatar, their spatial persona. But that detachment just kills that idea for me. Like, what's the point if you're in different rooms, right? Like, I'm looking around and I'm in my room and you're looking around and you're in your room. One day, this is the kind of technology that's going to bridge that gap when this can be done in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, I think I love that. It's imagine a living room that's split right down the middle between two locations, right? You've got one location in London, and you've got the other location here in the United States. So imagine like at the middle side of this screen, right? Everything from over there, I could see David's location, and over here, David could see my location. And if my cat comes running into the room, David could see my cat on the floor, or if he's, I could see the pictures on his wall, and we could talk about those things and share as if we were actually physically present with one another. And there's so many layers that have to coalesce for us to get there.
Yeah, that's so exciting to think about. I mean, if you combine what we always talk about in this show, which is photorealistic avatars, Meta's codec avatars, or a similar technology, with this photorealistic real-time capture, you get a telepresence technology that becomes one of the most significant inventions of the 21st century, right? It becomes one of those things where it's like before and after the telephone. Because when you're hanging out with someone today, you're either on a phone call, you're on a video call where you just see you see a picture of them in a little rectangle in your hand. It sucks, right? It's terrible. It's not like hanging out. You put your back camera on your phone and go, oh, look around, versus you put on a lightweight visor and you're literally standing there with them in their room. It's going to seem like the stuff of science fiction. For us all following the industry, it's going to, I mean, this is going to happen slowly. We're going to see this slowly over time arrive, where the capture technology gets better and faster, the avatars get better, the headsets get slimmer. But some people are not going to pick up these headsets at all until it happens. Or some people are not even going to be born until it happens, right? There's going to be people who, they only become like conscious age when this is available, and it's going to seem like magic to them.
No, it's not going to seem like magic. It's going to be life as usual, and photos and videos will seem like ancient technology. I think about this a lot, right? I'm seeing a change in language, people getting used to referring to the 1900s as last century, right? We're now 25 years, we're 1/4 of the way into this century, and people are starting to get comfortable with saying that old century was in the past and gone, and it's making all of our audience feel old because a lot of them are in our same age range here. But what does that mean? It means kids born in this century are going to think of all of that media as ancient as soon as the new media, the 3D media, is actually at a good state. And we're still like, right, we're still talking about voxels and Minecraft, right? Like, that's still one of the best virtual worlds, is giant-sized voxels. And how do you destroy them? You mine them one at a time. Well, what happens when you have tens of millions of voxels and you want to have a completely destructible world where the walls fall away and stuff like that? Like, we're still in the early days of this 3D ecosystem being born, and the moment that it takes shape, when these kids that are born right now start using headsets that have 3D scans as a standard of living, boy, everything before then is going to seem so much more ancient, so more quick, so much more different than it feels now.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point to point out that to them it won't seem like magic at all. It'll be just like the fact that we all fly from country to country on airplanes, which people a few centuries ago would have seen as utter magic and incomprehensible. And even a lot of the technology we use today, having a supercomputer in our pocket that gives you your exact position in the world in 3D mapping, and you can navigate anywhere and translate any language and pull up any of the knowledge of mankind in seconds. People would find that completely magical as well in the past. Onakazi, earlier in our discussion, said that would require active real-time remeshing. Not sure if anyone is doing that ATM. To be crystal clear, we're not talking about the technology today. This was saying, what will this look like in the 2030s? When it comes to this updating, none of that is possible today, but in the same way that a lot of these other things were possible back in the 1990s, right? The things that we all do today. You're pointing at the screen, Ian. I don't know what you're pointing at.
Oh, yeah, but I wanted to bring up Ray's comment. But yeah, video chat. I remember watching video chat videos like AT&T doing promotional videos going back to the 80s saying, we can do video chat. You just need to install two $4,000 phones in 2 locations in order to do it, right? But Ray Holder's comment, Scaniverse lets you Gaussian splat capture, edit directly on your phone, backed by Niantic. Very interesting comment there. Yeah, that you can see Niantic trying really hard to grow out of its Pokemon Go field of influence and into supplying a lot of other technologies.
Yeah, as an earlier commenter pointed out, there are like 5 or 6 different apps that'll let you do these Gaussian splats, and theoretically, with Gracia, the platform we were just talking about, you can upload any of them. I mean, this is the capture here is pretty. I'm not saying simple. Obviously, on a technological level, it's very difficult, but it's commodity, right? It's not like anyone has a monopoly on this. It's Gracia, their real magic sauce is being able to render them in real time in a VR headset, and with Varjo, their claim is that theirs is going to be the best for capturing like an entire scene rather than just a few
You know what's
objects.
funny? I had a random thought here. Forgive me for extending this episode a little bit, but people talking about movies, and you remember Ready Player One had that idea of them recreating scenes from films, and you would actually act out as the character in the book. They changed it up for the movie, but I think about uh what's the name of the movie? The Shining. The Shining has all these shots that are on like dollies and showing you locations. I really wonder if The Shining that got depicted in Ready Player One ends up being one of these locations that gets recreated via these 3D recreation systems just because of the way the film was shot back in the day with all these like geographic photos that could potentially be fed into a tool and recreated. So I like that idea that we might be able to actually go to the Shining rooms and feel like we're there, and it would be the same basic technology, wouldn't it?
I mean, yeah, I think that's just a matter of time, right? We're seeing like the advancement, as we've said many times in this show in recent years. The speed of advancement in AI is just staggering, and there's a lot of hype there. Yes, that's true. To the naysayers, there's a lot of hype, but there's also a lot of substance there. There's a lot of noise, but there's also a lot of truly astonishing signal, and this ability to every year generate more and more realistic outputs from less and less intense inputs is just staggering, and we really are going to get to that point. One of the most recent things that we've seen, obviously, is these models that can turn one meme image into like an extended video. So you have this old meme, and the character then walks through the scene that they were before. You obviously have these text to video models that are very impressive, although obviously all of this is very computationally expensive today. Um, I will continue to say that this space of AI is something where Amara's law applies, and if you haven't heard that before, it's that we overestimate how fast the technology will advance in 1 year and underestimate how far it will advance in 10 years. So everyone's saying, oh, AI is going to change the world and the economy and everything's going to change. Not in 1 year, no, but in 10 years, yes.
Yeah, very useful tool for thinking about that. A lot of interesting comments, but I think we got to move on quickly here. So let's move on to Xreal, David, and get through the last section of this show. Thank you all for tuning in. Come in next week or in the weeks ahead as we try to get back to our regular schedule. We had our showcase, we had some travel. David's got some travel coming up here soon, but we are going to try to keep regularity here. And wow, it's amazing to see us in the hundreds of people watching us for hours at a time. We thank you for being on this journey, having us on the background. If that's how you listen to us, or if you're intently watching us at the show, it means a lot. So thank you for that, and let's get through the end of this show.
Yeah, we really do appreciate everyone watching, and I apologize for how the intelligence level of my input here is going to get lower and lower as I overheat more and more. But we'll hope it's at least at a decent baseline. This news is Xreal Beam Pro. So this is a $200 phone-like device to power Xreal glasses and capture 3D content. So this is in every way an Android phone, except that the base model doesn't have a cellular modem. It's Wi-Fi only, but they actually are planning to come out with one that does have 5G. So the idea here is not to replace your smartphone. This is not like, oh, this is the phone that will make you sell your iPhone, right? That's not what they're doing. The idea here is that it's a dedicated device specifically for powering their glasses. And if you're not familiar with the Xreal glasses, they are essentially like dumb glasses. They're smart glasses, but they're dumb in the sense that they are just a monitor. So they take whatever input you put in via USB-C and they put it onto a virtual screen floating in front of you. So if you have the right adapter, you could connect your Nintendo Switch and it thinks it's outputting to a TV, right? And instead of a TV, it's just this monitor floating in front of you. And by default, that's zeroed off. It's not tracked at all. It's literally just fixed to your head like this. With some specific Android phones, you can, and with a specific adapter they have called the Xreal Beam, you can get this for $3, right? You can get like where the monitor stays in place when you rotate, but it's still fixed to your head when you actually move it around. And so the idea of this Beam Pro is that it is one of those phones that supports that. And on the latest Xreal glasses, the Air 2 Ultra, They even have positional tracking. They have 2 cameras on for positional tracking. So this Beam Ultra will also allow you to have your Android apps from this phone in a kind of spatial computing layout, right? So you will have, in the same way that we were talking about earlier with Quest, you can have your Android apps floating around. I question the performance of that, obviously, because this is running the same kind of chipset that a budget Android phone would. It is a $200 Android phone at the end of the day. You talk about, people talk about complaining about the performance of mobile chipsets in Quests, right? They are the highest end Qualcomm chipsets that Qualcomm makes. They're putting in their top of the tier CPU cores, their top of the tier GPU. This is Qualcomm's lowest one that goes into the kind of phones itself for this price. But it should be fine given that they don't have to do pass-through. It's just, the idea here is that you just have this very Vision OS inspired app launcher that runs the Google Play Store, and then you install them on just like you would a phone, and you can bring them up. And yeah, so Xreal glasses, if you're wondering like how well these things work, if you're not familiar, you may also immediately be thinking, hang on, why is Vision Pro a giant bulky headset when these things exist? The problem is that this is a transparent AR display system, and they have many flaws. One of them is that the field of view is tiny. The field of view of this headset is just comical compared to VR headsets. The other is that there are kind of these optical aberrations that you see that you don't really get. If you think that like some of the glare you get in a VR headset is bad, the color fringing you get on these kind of glasses is not great at all. That's not to say these aren't good, right? Like they have their use cases. If you just want to have a lightweight device that can give you a virtual monitor out of any device, that's cool. But you do need to be aware that like the field of view here is going to be very, very small. Like the marketing, the reason that we don't use any of the marketing images from Xreal that show the glasses with a virtual screen in front of them is because they're all horribly misleading. They show you having this giant display in front of you, like right beside you, and the glasses just don't have the field of view for that, right? You can get a giant display. They always say 100-inch, but it has to be really, really far away from you. If you want it to be close up, it's going to have to be a lot smaller to fit into that field of view. But it is an interesting product category. The idea that they are now, selling this dedicated compute device for it is really, really fascinating, especially if you have like an iPhone and you don't want to, change to a Samsung Galaxy phone just to use positional tracking features. So yeah, this is interesting. Don in our comment, he's UploadVR's Don Hopper. He's a big fan of these. He says they're great for travel and laying down watching video. It's absolutely true because you don't have the back padding that you have on like a Quest Pro or a Pico 4 or a Quest Elite strap. These are really lightweight and comfortable. It's a very thick and heavy pair of glasses. They do sit out from your face, like they're not as close to your face as glasses. They're designed to look like glasses, but something I would point out is that they are actually sitting further out. They do look very odd from the side. They don't look like glasses at all, actually, when you actually have them in real life. But yeah, it's an interesting product. The Xreal Beam Pro is an interesting solution to the compute problem. And the last thing I'll say about them is that they also are a device for capturing 3D photos and videos. You will notice that on the back that they have these very, very spaced cameras, and it's for exactly what you think it's for, capturing 3D photos and videos. And whereas the iPhone's camera app on the 15 Pro can capture 3D videos at 1080p 30 frames per second, Xreal says this one will do 1080p 60 frames per second, and obviously with a much wider stereo disparity.
So we've got a question here from Not Suspicious asking, is Meta going to demo 6DoF AR at this year's Connect? We believe that is their goal. Meta seems to pick things that they want to kind of show off near the end of the year at this conference. We've seen things like arena scale, Quest action used at a previous Connect. We've seen that they've done some weird stuff at previous Connects, but we have heard indications that AR glasses that are not even in the range of consumer pricing is the demo that they want to prove out this year, right?
Yeah, so much so that they say they simply could not manufacture it if they wanted to. Like they're going to show the equivalent of a concept car. They're going to show the glasses that they think will one day be manufacturable in like 5 years, and they're going to show them. Well, they haven't confirmed this, to be clear, but they have heavily hinted at it in interviews with The Verge. The Verge's Alex Heath was the person who leaked the claim that Meta was going to do this, then Alex Heath, interviewed Meta's CTO Andrew Bosworth, and they were like chatting about this like it was a fact. So this was like, at that point, if you're chatting with the CTO of a company where you've linked this thing and you're literally talking about this demo and glasses, it's there. Like Andrew Bosworth said about these glasses in that interview, that he said that in the realm of consumer electronics, they were the most advanced object ever made. He claims that these things are like straight out of science fiction. And again, he did reiterate that idea that they're so advanced that they cannot manufacture them. They're going to reportedly make 1,000 of them and use them to distribute to developers to start building content for the future, as demos to, hopefully, we hope, journalists like us, please Meta, please.
David's his first time begging for a demo. That's how excited he is by this demo. He wants, you're willing to grovel for the demo on this one, right? Because you know that it's the future, right? Like they've been investing tens of billions of dollars to deliver this demo, right?
Exactly. I think a huge reason for this, and I hope saying this doesn't get me kicked out of the demo, but I think a huge reason for this is that they need to show investors something after these tens of billions of dollars have been spent. You may have seen a lot of news reporting that's like, oh, Meta has lost 10 billion this year on the metaverse or on VR even. And that's not true. What Meta has been spending the majority of that money on is the AR glasses. So it's going to be a few more years until they can actually ship a product. But I think right now, this year, they finally just want to say, okay, look, here's the North Star. Here is what this technology can do. Here is what a pair of AR glasses can really be. And then they're going to put it on journalists' heads, we presume, developers' heads, probably like, important people in the tech industry, presumably some of their main investors, right? Especially like that. I'm sure that guy who wrote the letter to Mark Zuckerberg, the massive shareholder who told him, please stop investing so much in the metaverse. I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg will drive or fly to his house and put a pair on him. That's, I think, the real point here.
Interesting. I have more theories about why they're doing it, but I think David's on the right track there. And let's talk about Sumitro Sarkar's comment. Can VR headsets' field of view ever match that of a human eye? Really interesting question, because we've seen the rise of these open headset designs that let you just see the environment around you in that field over there. And we've seen stagnation on field of view for the better part of a decade here, right? Every VR headset still today has roughly 110 to 100 field of view. It's this range here that's the sweet spot where you can make the person comfortable. You don't show off things that are distracting in their periphery, like that could make you uncomfortable. So it's this sweet spot they're able to achieve performance. But what is the path beyond this field of view we've been scratching our heads at it for years, and so have the manufacturers. Like the people who are making the headsets keep giving us headsets that are this field of view for a very specific reason. And the reason is because going wider isn't good yet, right?
Well, I mean, the reasons are quite complex, right? The reason in some of these mainstream headsets like Quest 3 and Vision Pro is that getting a wider field of view currently directly competes with making them slimmer and lighter. And the focus in recent years, and will continue to be in years to come, will be making these headsets slimmer and making these headsets lighter. We saw a massive change going from Quest 2 to Quest 3 in that, for example. That said, Quest 3 was the end, albeit not gigantically, in the stagnation of Meta's field of view. Quest 3 has a wider field of view of any Meta headset. They did go up by roughly on the order of 10 degrees. That's not a huge difference. It's only 5 degrees on each side, but it shows that the right direction is going in. They're going in the right direction now. Interestingly, we actually plan to view a headset on July 12th. That's what I'm traveling to, called Somnium VR1. It's a PC-only headset. It's a tethered PC headset, but they claim that it will have the widest undistorted view of any, widest undistorted field of view of any VR headset to date in the consumer space. Obviously, I'm sure someone will point out that Pimax has been making these really wide field of view headsets that get to like 150, 160 degrees. But the problem there was that they were not undistorted. You had a regular field of view in Pimax headsets that was undistorted, and then as you go wider and wider, it gets like really horribly geometrically distorted. I really hated that personally. It's like a fishbowl effect. There's a lot of people that was a deal breaker for. And Pimax has actually now changed their strategy there, right? The crystal is not about field of view anymore. It's about clarity. They've decided that, for enough people, that just wasn't working. Like it wasn't a successful market idea that to deliver a wider but distorted field of view. So there is one headset though that actually does get to nearly the human field of view in terms of horizontal at least, and it's Xtal 4. And I talked about it on this show a while ago. It was at CES. I tried it years ago, CES 2022, I believe. The problem is that it costs $10,000. So it's an enterprise headset that went to this, and I was blown away by it. It really, to this day, I think it's probably still my favorite overall headset, the Xtal 4, because is it 3 or 4? I can't remember. But the point is, it delivered a really, really wide, undistorted field of view. One problem, of course, its vertical field of view is disappointing, and it's actually interesting that vertical field of view can feel more impactful than horizontal. One of the things the Valve Index did really, really well was to prioritize vertical field of view. And when you go into the Valve Index, the horizontal field of view is actually roughly the same as Quest 3. But why does it feel like a bigger field of view? Because the vertical field of view is taller, and that's something that has been really impactful. Pico 4 did this really well as well. Pico 4 has a great vertical field of view. Well, I need to get these right. A really great vertical field of view, a really tall field of view. And I really still have a soft spot for Pico 4. It's a really great headset because of that. I love its vertical field of view. To put this into numbers, to really answer your question, the human field of view is roughly on the order of 200 to 200 degrees horizontal and roughly on the order of 130 vertical. Today on a Quest, you get like 110 by 100, roughly, on like a typical headset. So we have a long way to go. Enterprise headsets are there. There's a new PC VR headset, but unfortunately, for the foreseeable future, the priority is going to be on making these headsets in the mainstream smaller and lighter, and that directly competes against making them wider.
All right, for those who are curious what's happening with my hand tracking, my kitty came over to me, and he would not have been okay on his own, so I am petting my kitty here. So those are kitty petting hand gestures. As awful as that sounds, that is what is happening here. David, why don't we get through the rest of this show as quickly as we can, because I can feel the sweat dripping off of you from here in the United States.
Yeah, I can feel my cognition slowing down. Our next topic is Apple Vision headsets. So Apple has reportedly suspended work on Vision Pro 2 to focus on making a non-Pro Vision. So it may be called Apple Vision, it may be called Apple Vision Air, it may be called something else completely. But we have seen now half a dozen reports, some from very reliable people, that indicate that is Apple's big focus now, that by the end of next year, they want to ship a Vision headset non-Pro that is priced somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000, and that does so by making some compromises compared to Vision Pro. At the same time, it should also be about a third lighter, according to multiple reports now. So this is probably going to be arguably the better overall headset, because like my biggest complaint right now with Vision Pro is the weight. It's just too damn heavy. If they can actually get a third of the weight off, and they can then, get the price cut in half, that's going to be a much bigger deal than Apple Vision Pro. Apple Vision Pro is going to be like the teaser, the introductory experience, and this is the real thing.
So Spatial Bigs are saying number one priority should be get the price down. Number two is weight. Those are very valuable priorities to think about. I think those go in hand, but when you're talking about a company that is as powerful and big as Apple, you can go to manufacturing partners and command prices a little bit differently than if you were a nobody. So that is one way that Apple can drop prices by getting cheaper components over time for their devices. But as David has pointed out again and again and again, Sony is the supplier of the displays inside of the Apple Vision Pro. And that means that Sony is potentially making more money from supplying Apple than they are potentially making from the PSVR 2. And that's the type of like direction we're moving in, where a company doesn't even have to actually make an HMD to actually make a lot of money from an HMD. And like you see a lot of confusing news with Apple Vision Pro. We're very careful. You might have seen people jumping to conclusions that Apple has canned their efforts here in VR AR completely because of the headlines on this, and that we have no indication. We every indication we have is that would be completely false and misunderstanding Apple's positioning here.
Yeah, there was a really frustrating, I think it was Mac Rumors headline on this, where it was just Apple suspends work on Vision Pro 2 without the context of to focus on making a cheaper headset. Sharon B in our comments, you're often here and giving a pro Apple Vision Pro view, and we appreciate having that here, saying that the Apple Vision Pro weight is average. They need a better head strap. I'm going to have to disagree with you there, and the reason I'm going to have to is because I have weighed all these headsets without their straps and facial interfaces, so just the visor part, right? And the Vision Pro is by that weight. You take off the head strap, you take off all the straps, the actual thing that the strap is supporting is 100 grams heavier than Quest 3. It is, as far as I'm aware, the heaviest visor of any of these standalone headsets so far. Like the actual thing is like, without any of the straps, it's like 500 grams. So I do think they do need to get the weight down as well as have a better head strap. Both of those things do need to come in hand, and that sounds like they're going to focus on it, right? And so the big question is obviously, what will they sacrifice? So we first think that the main reason they're going to get the cost down is that they're going to bring in new suppliers. So instead of Sony for their micro OLED displays, they're going to bring in Chinese companies BOE and Sia Technologies. Sia currently makes the micro OLED display in big screen beyond, so with a 2.5K display. And Sia is obviously hoping to make a near 4K or 4K display. BOE is a massive company. They're one of the biggest display companies in the world. They have made the LCD displays for several Quests now, several Meta products in general, and they have been the supplier for Oculus Go, for example, Rift S, some of the Quests as well. They're a massive company, and they are making their own 4K OLED micro display that is actually being used by a bunch of these headsets. So immersed visor is going to use BOE. I think the Chinese headset that we'll talk about soon is going to use BOE, and then Apple is hoping to use them too. So Sharon B saying Brian Tong weighed them too. It's lighter than Quest 2 and heavier than Quest 3. I think I've weighed Quest 2. You can see pictures in my reviews of these headsets. I have a picture of them on a physical scale. It's definitely heavier than Quest 2. So the other way they're going to do it is by compromising on some features. So we think that they're going to go from like this glass and aluminium design and go back to plastic, perhaps. They also may get rid of the front display that does eyesight, although there's a lot of people that would argue that they will never do that. That's a massive debate. And the other way they might do it is by going to an A series chipset instead of an M series chipset. So an iPhone chipset instead of a MacBook chipset.
Yeah, lots to consider there. Let's move on as quickly as we can to this next bit of Apple Vision Pro news. We're rounding the corner to the end of this massive episode, and I am just David's running through this as quickly as he can because I'm worried for you now, David.
Yeah, we're going to get through this. It's all good. So this one was an article I wrote in response to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman's new claim that Apple is considering making this Vision non-Pro headset dependent on a tethered iPhone or MacBook. Reliant, yes, reliant. Those are synonymous to me. I think those are literally synonymous, but okay. So reliant on a tethered iPhone or MacBook. Now, the MacBook one, I have nothing to say about. That's entirely possible. It would be a very strange business decision to make it that you have to use a MacBook, but it's not out of the question, right? Like one of the key use cases of Vision Pro at the end of the day is being able to connect to your Mac and extend its monitor. And it's definitely possible to see them doing something like that at some point in the future to make a really, really cheap headset. Completely possible. The iPhone one is where things get a lot different. And the article I wrote was essentially saying that this is simply not going to happen, that an iPhone cannot power a mixed reality headset of the scope of Vision that runs Vision OS. And you can read my article on uploadvr.com for more details on that. But the summary here is it's entirely possible that a future iPhone will have the peak performance to do this, as in the processor at its maximum performance can do what the M2 does today. The problem is that it will not be able to do that for more than a few minutes. And the reason is that the most important spec of a standalone headset is its cooling fan. Every headset since Oculus Quest has at least one. Vision Pro, I believe, has two, just like Quest Pro had two. On all of these headsets, you'll notice these like vents where all this hot air is pushed out, and these fans that are constantly running all the time to get this hot air out of the system and cool down the processor. An iPhone doesn't have that. A smartphone has all of these components jammed into like 7 millimeters of space. And what happens here is they thermally throttle, right? The processor heats up really, really quickly. There's nothing to cool it down. It starts to get up to a dangerous level of temperature where it's either going to compromise itself and damage itself or have the system shut down. So what do these systems do? What does a fanless computing device do? It reduces the peak performance on purpose. It reduces its clock speeds. This is called thermal throttling. And then this is aggressive feedback loop where you keep trying to push it. It keeps bringing down the computing power. And eventually you're stuck with something that is only a fraction of the performance. That's why every standalone headset today has a cooling fan. That is the big innovation in Oculus Quest. It sounds crazy to say that is the big innovation, but it's obvious in hindsight, right? But having that cooling fan was what allowed standalone VR to be possible. That's why this can happen. And even if you could magically solve that with a future cooling system, the battery in an iPhone is 1/3 of the capacity of the battery in Vision Pro's external battery. The Vision Pro external battery, it's just the battery. It weighs twice what an iPhone weighs. It doesn't even have any computing power in it. It's just a battery. So that's that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say that's another issue. And then even if you could solve both of these problems magically, right? Even if Apple could pull off one of the greatest feats of engineering in history and somehow solve these problems, people wouldn't even want to do that, because you would then create this strong disincentive to use the headset, where anytime you use the headset, you're rapidly draining your iPhone's battery, which is going to reduce the battery health and mean that you have to then go charge your phone when you're done. We saw this with Samsung Gear VR. It's a terrible user experience. I don't think Apple can do it from an engineering perspective or would even want to.
So just to push back, so I had David publish this as an editorial, right? We published this one as an editorial because it was coming from his perspective in particular. And my only pushback on his entire universe of logic he's created here regarding what's going to drive future devices is how much heat on an iPhone is produced from having the screen on. And how much heat do you take out of the equation by having that screen turn off because it's powering an external device?
There are off-screen benchmarks, right? I believe they can do this for iPhone as well, where when you're powering an external display, you're going to have it turn off. I think there are also benchmarks where they get something to be rendered but then not actually displayed. They're called like off-screen benchmarks. So the phone is completely blank. The screen itself generates some heat, but it's insignificant, right, compared to the actual. It's the battery and it's the chipset that are generating all that heat, right?
Okay, well,
yeah. Think about your your Mac Mini or whatever, right? It's got no screen. It's just sitting there, doing its thing, and it has this giant cooling fan. Apple are actually really, really talented at coming up with these cooling systems, these beautiful, brilliant cooling fans that you'll see in the teardowns of all of these Macs. The MacBook Pro has a really beautifully designed dual cooling fan system. The Mac Mini has this giant kind of big vortex thing. It's really cool, and they know this. Apple understands this.
So Geek Godin saying, guess we'll see if the upcoming iPhones will have a big bump in battery capacity. I really appreciate that comment because I have been looking at that same area as well, right? Like, I think if we see that, it will be a good indicator of the direction there. Like, when will we see the iPhone line affected by the things happening in other devices? We've got like the action button has flipped around from like it started on the watch, and then I think there's an action button on the phone now. Like, you see cross pollination of ideas to make these devices all like work together in sync. I'm really curious to see where they go with it, but I like Guy's thinking there that maybe we'll see iPhones pop up with significantly more um, battery. Like, I would go and buy a $2,000 iPhone, and I'm not.
I don't think it's just a matter of cost, right? It's like a matter of like the size. Would you buy a $2,000 iPhone that was like 3 times as thick?
Yeah, I know. So that then you start wondering about alternative, like, if you don't need the screen to be the best screen in the world, if you're going to operate the phone in all these other ways, right? If it's going to be powered off as a brick in your pocket most of the time, what other things do you need out of the device? Does the device just get thinner and thinner until it's invisible, or do you actually use some of that thickness for some of the power of these other things?
I mean, according to some of the reports now, Apple is actually looking to make the iPhone thinner, which is very interesting to me. You know, they're actually looking to do it thinner. And the thing about these OLED displays is that they're thinner than the LCD displays ever were. They're actually really, really, they're almost insignificant when you look
But
at like you've seen these TVs, right? OLED TVs, they're like, they're nothing. They're a couple of
but
millimeters.
but Pro devices don't. So they went through the effort of making a Pro line. I don't think the Pro line necessarily needs to be differentiated by thinness anymore. It needs to be differentiated by power.
I
By
agree with I agree with you, but according to the rumors, they're working on like an iPhone Ultra or whatever that is literally thinner. But we'll see how that gets pulled off. Even though, I mean, you physically just don't have enough space in something like this. Like again, the Vision Pro battery is it's big and thick and heavy, and it's just a battery. And yeah, it's but it'll be really interesting to see. The last thing I do want to say on this though is that, as I pointed out in my article about this, that does not preclude Apple using the iPhone to power glasses. Obviously, just a few minutes ago, we talked about a device that is a phone that powers glasses. And so why am I making that distinction? How is it that I'm saying, sure, it can power glasses, but not headsets? The reason is that glasses, at least in a certain instantiation of what you can imagine glasses being, would be much computationally simpler, right? You're not rendering an entire virtual environment ever. You're not you're not needing to process pass-through cameras, so you don't even need the energy for that. All you would have in a basic glasses OS for Apple glasses at first, if it was powered by an iPhone, would just be the ability to have the virtual screen spatial computing thing, right? So you have your Netflix app here and your browser app here, and maybe not even like browser. Maybe it's not even designed for like heavy interactivity. It's just designed for that core use case that Xreal is currently after, which is viewing media. So you're only rendering one or two virtual screens and objects at once. You're not trying to do like an entire environment. You're not having to do pass-through segmentation of your hands. All of this stuff that a mixed reality headset has to do to get you that view of the real world, and then also let you transition into a fully virtual world and mix between them. None of that would need to be present in a glasses OS. And so what they could do to power it by an iPhone is just run the iPhone GPU and CPU at a lower clock speed intentionally, so that you can stay within thermal limits nicely and not drain the battery and heat up.
Yeah, so a lot of people commenting on exactly what you said, David, and what we all know to be true. Not suspicious. I think people will still get anxiety using phone-based VR regardless of how much battery the phone has, because phones are critical devices. That was my experience with Gear VR. Where I'm going with that, though, is you've got interactions like you can hold your iPhone close to another iPhone, and a software experience pops up to make them look like they're magically talking to each other, which they are. But then you can share data between the two devices through a direct link. And you've got a route there where, like, let's say you've got your iPhone in your pocket with a terabyte of storage, right? You've got all of your movies downloaded on that drive. You've got a whole bunch of captures of 3D objects that you're looking at. The device is off in your pocket and you're wearing glasses, and all you want to do is watch a 2-hour movie now. You want to pull up one of the movies that are in your pocket. The the device in your pocket now no longer needs to activate the cellular connection. It doesn't need to call the tower over there and drain a bunch of power doing that sending. what it can do is just send a 4 GB file or a 6 GB file from the thing in your pocket to the glasses in your head.
I
And that could
mean,
be over in seconds. It won't
yeah,
drain
100%.
power.
But I don't think they would even need to transfer the file, right? They would just mirror the app. They would just have the actual file being played on your phone, and then the video output being sent to the glasses. And then the glasses have a simple processor on board that then, does the head tracking and positioning these windows. It would be a much simpler OS called probably Glasses OS, right? And it wouldn't, I completely think this could happen. And I think it will happen, right? I think like Apple will eventually get around to this once transparent optics get better, but it will be a separate product line. It won't be a replacement for Vision. It will be Apple glasses, and there will still be Apple Vision headsets that are standalone and have much greater capabilities and can, do this cool mixed reality capabilities and let you, do 3D object manipulation and all of this. And it'll be that same analogy we've talked about in this show before, where headsets are like laptops and glasses are like smartphones. You have all of this, incredibly powerful computing power in your laptop or your PC, most likely, if you're watching this show. And yet you still have a smartphone because it's much more portable, because it's much more practical to bring around in the world with you. These are going to be these two separate product lines that exist together, and they're going to be related operating systems, but different. And one of the reasons I think that is that Tim Cook very carefully said when he announced Vision OS, he did not say this is Apple's spatial operating system. He did not say this is the spatial operating system. He said this is our first spatial operating system. And to me, that's exactly what hints this is what Apple is going to take with approach here.
Yeah, good points. Very, very good discussion here. Davin adding, we will probably see AR devices with 5G or 4G LTE built in. Interesting comment, though. I think it's not thinking big enough. And I think if you've got a latest generation iPhone, if you go out of cellular service, you can make text messages send over satellite connection. And that's the type of thing that I'm really curious about over the next phase of computing. What can a distributed network of hundreds of millions or billions of Apple devices do to make your life easier in some way, shape, or form? Like if a copy of Dune 2 is sitting on a phone in the apartment next to you, why can't you get the copy of Dune 2 purchased from Apple, but sent to you from that phone with less data required from an internet service provider?
I mean, isn't that AirDrop, right?
I am describing AirDrop, but what I'm looking for is AirDrop for more uses in more places and doing more things to make this less reliant on 4G networks, LTE networks. Let us, I'm curious to see what happens with mesh networking in these next few years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see for sure. Do we want to move on to this next topic, this Chinese headset?
Yep, let's get through it. We've only got 3 more sections of this show, and then we will release you for today. Thank you for everyone for sticking through this, and thank you to David for his perseverance here in the heat. Let's see, Guy's comment here before I leave it off with David. Besides having a 5 instead of a 4 at the top right corner of my phone, I haven't noticed or experienced anything with all this 5G propaganda, and that was the case with 4G and 3G too. They actually tend to eat the networks, the old network, in order to make the new network run, and that's always a shitty thing.
Yeah, 5G was the most overhyped technology in the history of the industry, right? Like, if you remember the marketing around it, if you remember that, like, I don't know if people remember this, but the Snapdragon XR2 chipset that is in Quest 2 and some of those other headsets like Pico 4 was originally marketed as the XR2 5G, right? Like, there's not been a single product that has a 5G modem that uses it, right? That's not like a thing that actually has existed. There was when I asked Qualcomm, I think like, wait, wouldn't all these headsets be used on Wi-Fi? There was just like an almost blankness to this of like, there was a time where everything Qualcomm did had the word 5G in it. There was I think every phone was called like the Snapdragon, or sorry, every phone was called like the Samsung Galaxy something 5G. There was like the Pixel 4a 5G, the Pixel 5 5G. And yeah, it's an iterative update, right? It's like, it's a bit faster. Okay. It's a bit faster. Sometimes it handles more people in the same network. If you're lucky
It
enough to
doesn't,
get
and if
these,
you're in the wrong city, it doesn't, right? Like that's what ends up happening, and you end up going backwards in some cases because
well, I
the
mean,
city hasn't been equipped with.
maybe in your experience, I find that it seems to do density better. It's one of their claims. Yeah, I mean, it's an iterative
All
update,
right,
but
let's get off of 5G. How did you distract us on 5G? All right, all right.
I think you did with bringing in Gigon's comment.
Yeah, fine. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's get David back on topic.
I have one comment to read though from Chrome Colossus. David is thermal throttling like a champ. Yes, that is true. That is actually
Dissipating the heat of the Quest through his body. Oh man.
yeah.
All right.
I mean, it's the room even. This is the thing. Even without the headset in England, like this country is designed for cold. All of the buildings here are designed to keep in the heat. It is a relatively new phenomenon that it gets this hot. We don't have ceiling fans. We don't have air conditioning. We don't have like, buildings designed to get heat out, but we'll not complain about that anymore. Let's talk about this Chinese headset. So, that Sony headset we talked about uses the XR2 Plus Gen 2 chipset. Okay. And as we said, Qualcomm announced it back in January. And so one of the companies they said was going to use it, one of the 5 was YVR. So to be clear, the 5 is immersed visor, Sony's headset, an HTC headset that has not been announced, Samsung's headset that they're making with Google, and then a YVR headset. YVR being a Chinese VR headset company that's been making VR headsets there, standalone headsets, for years. The Chinese market is fascinating in a way because it's completely separate from the rest of the world. They have their own companies. Some of them are like the equivalent. One of the companies is the equivalent of Netflix, like China's equivalent of Netflix, that actually makes their own headset and focuses on letting you view their content in it. Crazy. Very different market. Very, very different. But this company, YVR, renamed itself to Play for Dream and has announced its headset, Play for Dream MR. Now, it is a very similar design to Apple Vision Pro in many ways. The visor is very identical. There's a better angle from another outlet, but it was very low resolution that shows that like the top looks pretty much identical. I think you can see a little bit of it, but in this, you can see this design that looks like very, very Apple Vision Pro. But instead of having a soft strap, it has a Quest Pro style rear battery. You can see that quite well in this image, a Quest Pro style rear battery. So we reported this as saying that it's like a crossover of Apple Vision Pro and Quest Pro. It's like Apple Vision Pro and Quest Pro had a baby and it went on to have higher resolution than either of them. Because unlike the cheap Chinese knockoff of Vision Pro we talked about in January, this thing has some monstrous specs and it actually is a very, very, very high-end headset. One interesting aspect of it is that it doesn't just have a rear battery. It really is a combination of these two headsets because it also has an external tethered battery. So the rear battery can power this thing for 1 hour. 1 hour. And then if you add the external battery, that adds 2.5 hours. So together you get 3.5 hours. Very interesting design choice. But it pairs that chipset with 16 gigabytes of RAM, the same amount of RAM as Vision Pro. It has either 0.5 terabyte or 1 terabyte of storage. So you get, in terms of which model you pick, it has pancake lenses that are magnifying 4K OLED micro displays. So that is higher resolution than Apple Vision Pro. It's those BOE panels that are also going into visor. And also probably going into the cheaper Vision headset next year. And it uses, eye tracking, pass-through cameras, and interestingly, controllers. It has touch plus-like controllers using the exact same concept as Quest 3. There are little IR LEDs hidden under here. It is running Play for Dream's own fork of Android, so their own platform, their own store, and they're going to sell it for somewhere under $2,000 equivalent. So I think the rumor is that it's going to be like $1,800 equivalent, but this is not coming to the United States or the West. It is coming to China soon. And then I think like Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, basically Southeast Asia, it's going to be launching in. And they have not said anything about bringing it to the West.
Yeah, I just want to make a pitch for David's hardware coverage in general. We've seen he's mentioned a couple different headsets through this show that I honestly, I only care about hearing what he has to say about the headset anymore. I don't like that's the threat to our competition, right? Like you're doing great work writing about VR hardware, but his is the only opinion I really care about. And so we have him going to see Somnium and see what they're doing. And then I saw it earlier in our comments, someone asking about the immersed headset, asking whether the immersed visor is a real thing. We have been very skeptical of the effort here on our show. We've, made clear that they have not shown us this hardware, and we are always crystal clear when we don't actually see hardware ourselves. When we see it demoed in a video or it's not demoed at all, like we're crystal clear about all of that. We have not seen this headset, and yeah, that's just a pitch that, if you're a hardware maker, if you're building this stuff, send it to David. He's going to give it a fair shake. He's going to try his best to assess that hardware with what it's like. He's going to see whether you delivered on your intentions, and we're doing that this year. We don't have that demo of this hardware, but we're working really hard to get us demos of all the major hardware that's coming. And just wanted to make that pitch that we've got that coming.
Yeah, this is one we don't think we're going to get hands on. This is only launching in Southeast Asia, but yeah, as Ian said, in a few weeks, we're going to bring you our coverage of that Somnium PC headset with the wide field of view. In September, we're going to bring you our coverage of Visor. But yeah, this thing, really interesting that it's launching outside China at all, to be honest. I didn't expect it to launch outside China. I guess the last thing we'll say on this, because it transitions onto our next topic quite nicely, is that this is what I might have expected a very ambitious Quest Pro 2 could have been this year. We know that a Quest Pro 2 for 2024 was cancelled. This is using the same chip they would have used. Meta could have shipped a Quest Pro 2 like this if it really wanted to. This literally could be exactly what Quest Pro 2 looks and works like, where you have this ability to power the thing off battery for a small amount of time and then extend that with an external battery, and then you have these controllers and pass through and eye tracking and a slimmer design. It could have happened. Really could have happened.
I wonder if I drifted. I think I drifted over the course of our episode here. I'm in the same position. I've got a wall behind me, but my performance has decreased, and I think I'm gonna have to restart the headset because
I think the headset really maybe itself thermal throttling. It also could be like an app thing. Go ahead, you restart first. I'm probably in the same situation. I think I have a picture here of someone wearing the headset that we can show until we're ready. David Bigelow asking, are we going to crowdfund to send me to China? I don't want to say anything political here, but I have no plans to ever enter China for any reason. I guess I would go to one of the other countries this is launching in, though. They did this launch event in Malaysia, which is interesting. The launch event happened in Malaysia. So yeah, next we're going to talk about Quest Pro 2. Anti-Claire, I don't think that's political. I didn't say anything particular. I don't have any plans to enter China for any reason. I'm just telling you what my future plans are. That's all. Finally, we'll talk about the Avalanche cloud streaming service that Meta has been working on for years and years now.
All right, I'm back. Performance seems to be a little improved. Sorry about that. Let's get to our last subjects here. Gosh, what time is it? Are we at 3.5 hours, David? Is that what this is? Oh my God.
I think it's 2.5. I think it's 2.5. No, wait, it is 3.5. Holy shit, it's 3.5.
Yeah, when I left, people were talking about crowdfunding you to go to China. That is what you do when you support us with membership at UploadVR.com. I want to send David to China, become a member of UploadVR.com so that we can make that happen.
Absolutely not. No, under no circumstances. But let's move on from that before we get too bogged down in controversy. Quest Pro 2. I'm definitely thermal throttling I don't mean my head, I mean my actual brain. So Quest, according to the information, the same outlet that reported that Apple was shelving its Apple Vision Pro 2 to focus on the cheaper headset, in that same report, they reported that Meta began work on Quest Pro 2 in November. So that's 8 months ago now. And the codename this report used for this headset is actually one we've heard before. In a Meta roadmap that was leaked to The Verge in early 2023, so early last year, they reported that this headset, La Jolla, however that's pronounced, it should have much higher resolution for text.
Lahala?
I don't know. I don't live in California. I don't know these place names. But yeah, it should have a rear battery. Really interestingly, should have codec avatars.
La Jolla.
La Jolla. There we go. Thank you very much. So the idea is that Meta cancel the 2024 Quest Pro 2 to instead work on a much more ambitious, further out headset that can do the photorealistic codec avatars standalone on the headset and has a lot higher resolution and still has the rear battery design. So that's something that we expect at the earliest would launch in 2025, but I have a suspicion that they're going to aim this thing for 2026 and that they're going to go really hard on this and try to actually push a high-end headset. I feel like if they're canceling something near term, if they're trying to get the codec avatars out, Quest Pro is a failure. I think that they want to say, if we're going to do a high-end headset, let's do it right. Let's do one that really pushes the boundaries, that delivers photorealistic avatars, really high resolution, that can do these virtual monitors. And another feature may come to. This is the second part of this category, because recently a Quest firmware data miner, Simulia, discovered strings referencing varifocal. So Simulia has found a bunch of stuff in the Quest firmware in the past. They were the person who found the strings that revealed that Quest Pro 1 would have face and eye tracking. They found those strings referencing face and eye tracking a year before Quest Pro 1 shipped, and we reported on it at the time, and it was a revelation. Wow, Meta is working on productizing a headset with face and eye tracking. That was really interesting. And so now we see, these are debug features that are allowing developers or engineers somewhere at Meta to, on a headset that is running the Quest firmware, not some prototype thing that's just running a PC like they do for most of their prototypes. This is actually running the consumer Quest firmware with varifocal enabled on a standalone headset. Like, we know that Meta has varifocal prototypes. I've tried varifocal prototypes, but they were all running off a PC. So this proves that they are working to actually build that into a product. Does that mean that that product will actually ship? No. Does that mean that that product will be Quest Pro 2? No. But it's a very interesting timeline to see Meta starting to work in November on this Quest Pro 2, and now these varifocal debug tools show up.
Blair making the comment that it's funny that it still says Oculus in the code. And then Guy is saying, I'm surprised they weren't in there before because they've had prototypes of varifocal for years. I guess it's the first time it runs the Quest firmware directly. Love that comment. And I think a lot about the fact that Meta has no store presence. They have no way for you to go and get a repair for a headset. You got to ship it off, wait days, and then you get it shipped back. I can go to an Apple store in New York that's open apparently 24 hours and make an appointment at like 1 a.m. for a repair of an Apple device. Well, when you've got moving parts potentially inside of a headset that can fall out of alignment or cause a problem, you need to have a repair system. Didn't we hear that headsets at Meta got canceled because they failed drop tests? Wasn't that something we heard?
Well, I don't think it was canceling a headset, but it was deciding that a feature needs to pass drop tests. Drop tests are very, very important. John Carmack has talked about how there are ways you could make a headset lighter that would compromise these drop tests, and he's argued for that. I mean, I'm sure that the argument to the contrary is quite convincing too, though, right? You don't want to make a product that costs hundreds of dollars that someone can drop on the floor and then breaks.
No, Ghost Shot mentioning they just replaced the headset. I'm sure, like I've done it with AppleCare multiple times, but that's the point. That's the advantage that Apple has is they've got a whole system worked out. So they just hand you a new device, they take the old one, they get it repaired. Meta has to build that out at the same time that they're building products. And that's why we have this like situation where we've seen varifocal on their drawing boards for decades, or not decades, for many, many years now. And
Yeah, and I
they
tried
had
it.
to move to electronic features of delivering it without moving parts because
Exactly.
it's cheaper and also because of these drop test situations.
Yeah, it's more reliable as well. It can last for years. Yeah, the original varifocal tech in Half Dome 1 and 2 used moving parts. They actually literally moved the displays back and forward to change the focus distance. That was quite a crude method. The Half Dome 3 prototype uses instead electronic varifocal, where they're actually using these lenses, that a stack of lenses where the focus changes as you apply a different voltage, so you can combine them in different ways to have different focus depths. But that, I mean, that brings us on to what we really need to say here, which is a question from Andre, who asks, what is varifocal? We haven't actually explained that. Apologies for that. So because we don't have much time, I'll make this really brief. So every headset today, everyone you can buy at any price, anywhere that you can buy, even if you're an enterprise company, even if you have $10,000 to spend right now, is fixed focus. So in all these headsets, you're getting a separate image for each eye, yes. So you do get stereoscopic binocular 3D, and they're all head tracked. So you get the depth cue of the fact that when you move, things are at different parallax depths. All of that's there. You get stereo disparity, you get parallax depth, but there's one important depth cue that is missing, and that's focus blur, right? All of these headsets are fixed at like sometimes 2 meters, sometimes infinity, sometimes 1 meter. Varifocal is when, as your eyes move around, the focus of the image changes based on the distance to the virtual object you're looking at. Not having varifocal makes VR feel less real in real life, and it can even induce eye strain in some people. There are some people that can't use today's headsets because they get eye strain. And one of the places that you really notice this is in close-up objects. If you bring an object very, very close to your face, you will notice that it's blurry in a way that there's no solution to. No matter how high resolution you make that display, no matter whether you have the super duper 8K, 16K, ultra sharp headset, it doesn't matter because the image is focused. The actual image from like an image physics focal length perspective out at meters and meters away. So I did get to try the varifocal headset. I talked about it on that VR download episode. You can search UploadVR hands-on varifocal on Google to see my impressions. And it really was a big deal. It's not only that stuff close up is actually sharp for once, which is pretty crazy and very impressive, but it's also that it just makes everything feel more real in a very subtle way. You get this extra depth cue. Like you're probably all in real life right now. You don't have a headset on, I would presume. Look around and notice that focal depth you see, right? You look at an object close by and everything out away, everything. Oh, my headset may be dying. Everything. Yeah, I'm going to restart. Muted. Ian, you're muted. You're muted.
I was muted that whole time. Gosh. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was explaining eye distance. I don't need to explain that again. It was a bad time to be muted. Oh
Okay, I'm back
man.
on a Quest 3, so my microphone quality is going to be a little bit lower for a while, but we're near the end of the show anyway, so I hope you can all put up with that. My Quest 2 is just, it's just not liking being used for 3.5 hours straight. It's even with a cooling fan, it's thermally throttling, right? It's literally, even with that fan,
Let me. All right. I
still
was, I was
thermally
explaining
throttling.
that hold your finger up, watch, focus on the finger, and then look at your wall on the opposite way. Notice the way the eye muscles and your eyes themselves point differently when they're looking far away. Varifocal lenses and varifocal optics will reproduce that for you the same way your eyes work in the real world, and we don't have that right now. We have tricks that don't simulate any of that, and that's what I was explaining when I was muted.
Yep, it really is a big difference. We haven't seen it on any shipping headset yet. It's something that's just in the research labs, something that Meta's been talking about for years now. I think as early as 2018, maybe even 2017. But it's been one of those things that everyone just thinks, oh, I'm sure one day it'll arrive, but they keep saying this is research. And that's why that string finding is just so compelling, right? Because like that is the first evidence we have that this is actually on the path to productization now. The only thing we'd heard about before was in 2022, Mark Zuckerberg said to expect this technology in the second half of the decade. So I guess we're getting pretty close, right? Like if this Quest Pro 2 is going to ship in 2026, and
I'm
maybe
not muted
you could
anymore,
do
so
it.
people are still catching up to the fact that I was muted earlier, and people are amazed that we're still going on 4 hours here. Yeah, never let it be said that we do not put in our hours in VR, right? Like we
Yeah.
we we put in our time just to talk to each other. I don't want it to be. I don't want to. Yeah, like that's extraordinary to have to do this just to talk with each other. We are on our last subject here, and I'll just give it a little intro here because we've done some exclusive reporting here with our efforts with our contact network, Plutosphere. We had them in this studio. One of the co-founders of Plutosphere came here and talked to us about what happened. They were streaming PCVR content to Quest headsets using a token system very similar to arcade. So you would buy basically tokens to use to spend time inside of PCVR games on Quest headsets wirelessly, and they would basically just pick out a computer for you in their server farm, stream everything to your PC as quickly as or straight to your headset as quickly as they could, and you can enjoy things like Half-Life Alyx or PC VR chat anywhere you are on a Quest. Well, they're out of business. They're done. And the reason they're out of business and they're done is because of a rule that Meta has imposed in place that Guy Godin in our comments is very familiar with as a creator of Virtual Desktop that disallows developers from shipping this sort of technology if you don't have physical access to the PC that's streaming the content to you. Meta will argue this is for comfort reasons, that they can ensure that the VR content is high quality. However, I think as time goes on and we are faced with the reality of situations like Plutosphere and the news that David is about to give us, what Meta has done is reserved an entire gigantic area of functionality for itself and its partners that it chooses to play with. And, well, we'll see if I'm right on that. But, David, why don't you break it down?
Yeah, firstly, I just want to address a comment from Guy Godin about the previous feature with previous news, which is interesting. Guy Godin, again, the developer of Virtual Desktop, if you're not familiar, and he said, could it, varifocal, be the first feature to come out of meta research besides hand tracking? After all those years of doing research, it might be time to be useful for something besides filing patents. It's quite a funny comment, although I would point out there are quite a few things that have actually shipped from meta research. One of them is their audio SDK. So their audio spatialization about a year and a half ago got significantly better. It now is the top benchmark for positional realism for audio. That came out of their research. Quest 3's lenses, that was something that came out of their optics research. Quest 3 currently has the best lenses in any headset with no competition. You cannot buy a headset for any price that has clearer lenses with a wider eye box and larger area of clarity than Quest 3. So that came out of their research. Inside out body tracking, that came out of their research. The ability to have the arm and shoulder and torso tracked. The meta avatars don't use it here yet, but they do. The hand tracking does kind of support it with this thing called wide motion mode. So you'll notice if I put my hand above my head, the hand tracking keeps going. It's not still tracking my hand; it's actually just tracking my arm. But yeah, there are a few things that have come out of Meta's research. There probably another I'm missing. Um,
People suggesting the Meta Ray-Ban glasses count. It's also impressive. That's an interesting idea. Like a lot of the audio technologies, that the Meta Ray-Ban glasses has some stellar audio technology for both capture and feedback. And what we said earlier in the show, tens of billions of dollars of investment is going specifically into that product line.
Yeah, I mean the positional tracking itself as well, right? Like when Oculus Insight first launched for Rift S and Quest, it was very much so handcrafted. But over time, they have been putting in more and more machine learning there. And again, I think when it comes to like controller tracking, when it comes to head tracking in environments, I've tried a lot of inside out tracked headsets. Quest 3 and Apple Vision Pro are in a league of their own. Nobody else has got the quality of inside out tracking that Apple and Meta have pulled off. And again, that sort of stuff comes from research labs. And
let's call out Guy's other comment here and then get to this final subject, because we've been teasing it now, but we haven't yet said it. But Guy's comment: so they blocked developers for 3 years from shipping one thing like what we're talking about now.
yeah,
They
so
better deliver, is what Guy is challenging them on. So what do they need to deliver on, David?
yeah, so that's the context. To be clear, that Pluto Sphere news is not new news. That happened months ago now, I think. And, we reported on it at the time. We talked about it in the studio. Ian did an interview with Pluto Sphere at the time. That's just some background context that is somewhat relevant to this. The news is that Meta is still testing its own cloud PC VR streaming service, which is codenamed Avalanche. And so we know this because it actually showed up on the Quest 3 of a French news outlet, GamerGen. So they were doing a live stream with their Quest 3 and they went into an experimental settings, which all of you will know if you have a Quest, and they saw this new option, Activate Avalanche. And we've actually seen this before because a few years ago now, I believe it was, oh God, it's either 1 or 2 years ago, a Redditor had this exact same feature show up in their Quest. And they even claimed, that Redditor back then, that they were able to get in and play Asgard's Wrath, the original PC VR game, not the sequel, which wasn't even released back then, on this service through their Quest, through cloud streaming. And so the French outlet that this week had it show up on their Quest 3 was offered to play Lone Echo. But when they clicked connect, it started to connect for like a second or two and then had a connection failure error. So what we know here is that Meta is working on this. It's called Avalanche. It is capable of cloud streaming Rift games to Quest. What we don't know is, what is Meta's plan here? Is this just an experiment? Is this a future product? Is this something that they're going to use to bring over some of these Rift blockbusters that they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on together? Or could this even be a new platform where developers, third-party developers, can build PC VR quality games and ship them to Meta Avalanche, and then Quest users can buy them in their headset and stream them? There are a range of possibilities here. We just don't know what's going to actually happen.
Guy's comment here: if it's just to play old Rift titles, it will be dead on arrival. I think that's a useful comment. They do have a lot in that Rift library, but it does need to do more than just that Rift library if people are going to do it. And how exactly do they get permission?
If that's the only, if that's what the feature is for, it doesn't make it dead, right? It's just that that's what it does, It's like, if that's all that it is, because the idea of having a platform here is cool, and I would love to see it. But what's the business case there, right? Like, Meta is paying for every second that you're streaming this from them.
Whereas, well, and they need to draw more revenue from what your eyeballs see, right? Via funding incoming. So like, I got my first ad. I got my first ad in VR on my flight back from AWE, and it was the airline. it was the airline requiring me to watch an ad on flyfi.com in order to have Wi-Fi access in the air flying over the United States. We've long joked, it's the joke of Ready Player One, that we will have ads driving us in VR. Like you will cover up some of your what's the joke? You can cover up 90% of a person's field of vision before they cause seizures, right? How do you take more revenue via the ads people see than it takes to stream the content to them directly?
I mean, you've made a massive assumption here that they're going to use ads as the monetization system. There's another one that a commenter has pointed out here that makes a lot more sense to me, and it's the MetaQuest Plus subscription. They already are getting people to subscribe to MetaQuest Plus every month to get access to a games catalog and to redeemable games. Why wouldn't you say MetaQuest Plus now with old Rift titles? So you're paying that money every month, and for paying that, you get access to stream Asgard's Wrath 2 and Lone Echo. Now, because of the cost of this, which is definitely non-trivial, it's entirely possible that they would do both. You would have to have a Quest Plus subscription and buy the game. So you have to spend $60 for Lone Echo or $40 or whatever it was, plus your $8 a month MetaQuest Plus subscription, because the cost of this is so big. And in exchange for that, in exchange for giving them the ongoing revenue for the server costs and the price of the game, you get really, really high fidelity graphics on your Quest without a PC. To me, that's what's the most sense. Now, the other thing we haven't talked about here is just like the tech here, right? So we have a comment here from Ghost Shot saying, I'm pretty sure the entire internet needs to improve for cloud PC VR to work efficiently. A lot of people are going to, say that this isn't, your internet connection isn't good enough. The answer is it depends on your internet connection. It depends on your city. We've discussed this with cloud before. What matters is, where is the cloud PC? Is it in your city? Is it on the other side of the country? Is it on the other side of the planet? If it's in your city, there is no reason that cloud gaming can't feel as low latency as using virtual desktop with your PC in your home. There's no, like, the latency, the speed of light between your computer and another computer on the other side of the city is irrelevant, right? That's insignificant. That only starts to get into importance when you're talking about going across a country or a continent.
Yeah,
So that's how it needs to be. But nobody's going to roll it out like that. Nobody has ever had the balls to roll out a cloud gaming service per city, even though if they did it, it would have really, really heavy reliability.
Yeah, I'm really, really curious to see what comes in this area, right? So the Ghost Shot comment that you read out, that the internet needs to improve for cloud PSVR to work effectively, speaks straight to my heart, right? I went, let's wrap this up. I went to Augmented World Expo last week, and my biggest problem with producing content for our website was bandwidth. I was squelched on bandwidth uploading. They didn't have the media Wi-Fi network up at the venue. The hotel limited upload speeds, 2 hotels limited upload speeds. And then I'm on managed airport Wi-Fi or managed airline Wi-Fi, where, again, managed speeds are uploaded. In most places of the world, the internet service providers have squelched how much you can upload to their services in order for the things to function.
In the United States, actually, you'll find that in most of the world, you can get home internet that is unlimited in every way for almost no cost. That is a very much so a US thing. This is like the WhatsApp thing all over again. Every country in Europe. I've gone to Eastern European countries that are ostensibly like low-income countries, and you get unlimited internet there for nothing. You go to any country in Europe, and you'll find truly unlimited.
What is the reason for this is my core question. Why is it different in the United States, which happens to be the same countries that birthed us Facebook and Google, which are sucking down tons and tons of data from all the things we do online on a global scale, such that the European Union had to change the laws of their entire, governance in order to stop this behavior from happening of sucking down all your data from your traffic online. Why is it limited in the US, and how is the US going to stay up to speed with the rest of the world when this is the thing that's holding us back?
As far as I understand this, and I have looked into this, it's a matter of lack of competition. As far as I understand it, in many parts of the United States, your ISP offerings are like one or two or three. Whereas if I'm in a typical UK home, there are dozens of ISPs. I mean, like you would almost have a tough time picking between them. There are literally dozens. And
Mm.
that's the case for most other countries. So that competition forces down the price, and it forces them to offer more ability. I don't know. Can you tell me from where you've lived, how many ISPs do you normally have offering per home?
One usually, and in a rare occasion,
There's
there might be a second, but
there's your answer. It's a monopoly or duopoly. That's the
yeah,
problem.
it's horrible. And yeah, and Blair is saying that Canada throttles uploads as well.
Okay.
The
Well,
reason I
I
bring
can
this
only
up,
talk. I only speak for Europe, and I mean a couple of Asian countries as well that I've been to. That yeah, it's unlimited and very low cost everywhere I've been to, other than the
well,
United States.
we will come back to this because it is going to be the very front. We're going to the very core of the limiting factors of VR and AR headsets, and I do believe internet connectivity is Plutosphere. When I talked to them, the Plutosphere guys went to Korea to test out what sub 10 millisecond, like 5 milliseconds of latency would feel directly from the server to his headset in random locations around the town. So you've got this country that's got super advanced internet, and they went there to test the service that will hopefully we'll all have in 5 to 10 years. But like, we need our infrastructure, our internet infrastructure, to change fundamentally for things like this to run. So I guess we'll leave our audience on that note. Are there any comments you want to respond to before we close off this 4-hour mega show?
Yeah,
Jesus.
we have people pointing out that there's some political aspect here. AT&T apparently lobbied in the 90s to disallow ISPs to operate in the same region. We have a comment saying that in Norway there are two big fiber companies and there are no constraints there. So they're saying in that market, even though there's only two companies, there is an effective market there. So that's, I mean, yeah, it's very interesting to see this. There are some like things that are unique about the US that are very strange to me, like this. Like the WhatsApp thing is obviously very strange, and the internet service provider thing. You
Well,
can
thank
only hope.
you. Yeah, we'll be on it. We'll figure out what's actually going on here and have the latest for you on VR and AR headsets. Thank you to David. Oh, I gotta satisfy this curiosity. First off, what is your temperature? How hot is it in your room? And then our audience, please translate it from Celsius to Fahrenheit for me.
Again, so there's a lot of debate about this, about it's not going to sound hot to you, but again, you have to realize this is like high humidity. These houses are keeping the temperature in the actual indoor temperature in the room right now is fluctuating between 27 and 29, even though outdoors I believe it was like 21 to 24.
I'm looking for the translation from our comments. Yeah. I what I notice is about 70 degrees is where the limit is for me. If it gets if I put on the headset at 70 degrees, it'll feel like it's like 75 or 78.
Yeah, and obviously yeah,
And I'll start
I'm wearing
sweating.
a headset. One thing I wanted to note, completely irrelevant to what we're talking about here, though, that I'm you probably noticed by the reduced microphone quality that I'm in a Quest 3 right now, and it's staggering how much better it feels to be in a Quest 3. Not only the comfort, but like as a developer of this app, I know the performance gulf between Quest 2 and Quest 3 is enormous. Some people really underestimate how big it is. I'm able to run this at such a nice, crisp, high resolution at 120 hertz on Quest 3, and I'm not dropping a single frame. And whereas I was back on Quest 2 at a lower resolution, 90 hertz, and it was dropping frames the whole time. And this is just, it's really nice and comfy to be at a smooth 120 hertz right now. I'm liking that. It's so much easier. Very soon we're gonna get a external mic hooked up to this Quest 3 so that I can use this in the studio from now on.
Yeah, Ray Holder saying that 29 degrees C is 84 degrees F. Thank you for that. I asked Siri while I was muted there because our commenters decided to troll me and give me a really ridiculous temperature conversion there. Thank you for that, Chrome. Yeah, it's been a fun show here. A lot of random subjects, things we just barely touched on in this show that we are going to get into more over time. If you haven't watched our showcase yesterday, please go give it a look. That was more than 50 entries of from across the landscape of just the smallest developers. We've had some of them in our comments here. Airspace Defender looked like a really cool idea, and it got into the show just because they submitted it to us, and we thought it was a cool idea. So we want to keep up that in the future. Let us know if you've got anything cool in VR at tips@uploadvr.com, and we'll see you in the future. Come tune for Gamescast when we're back here with Don.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for sitting through us with our longest show ever. Mr. Mycelium, yes, we absolutely will want to review the Logitech pen, and I'll try its compatibility mode in a zombie game and tell you what happens, just for you. Yes.
4 hours
Thanks,
stream,
everyone.
yeah. And Guy, choose your words carefully, because we will read out your comments. And yes, we're all a little bit grumpy. We're getting older, we're getting grumpier, so it comes across. But you're a major developer in the space, and there are a lot of people in this audience that use your software. So we think it's valuable to call out your comments when you make them, because it does matter to a lot of people what you have to say. So thank you all, and we'll see you in the future.